Good afternoon, everyone. The Senate Finance Committee is now in session. And this afternoon, we have some very interesting bills to hear from interesting sponsors. I'll just run down the list. First is Senator Zucker with Senate Bill 717, Senator Guzon with Senate Bill 746, Senator Griffith, Senate Bill 801, Senator Carter, Senate Bill 757, and Senator Feldman, Senate Bill 708. And after we finish with the hearings, we will be voting about a half hour later. For each of our bills, the senators who are the sponsors have selected someone in most cases as a lead proponent for their bill. That person will have 5 minutes following the sponsor's introduction of the legislation. Others testifying on the same bill orally will have 2.5 minutes. And Senator Zucker, you're on now.
Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chairman, distinguished members of the Senate Finance Committee, it's great to be back with you for both an interesting and important bill. It's Senate Bill 717. This is dealing with state personnel collective bargaining. Look, I think I speak for everyone on in the General Assembly, quite frankly, on how appreciative we are of our state employees and how much they've taken on during these difficult times. And back in 2018, in the wisdom of this General Assembly, we passed legislation that allows state employees access to exclusive bargain unit representatives. And what we've seen through this global pandemic, being the coronavirus, is just areas of the law that need to be updated to reflect the current time. So this legislation that's being put in provides those opportunities where state employees, especially those in the higher education field, would have access to their collective bargaining, the bargaining unit representative within the first pay period. It also gives them flexibility when it comes to meeting with them virtually, and also gives them more time, quite frankly, with their representative. During these trying times, it's important for them to have this access and flexibility. I do appreciate the great work of AFSCME and all of the members that they represent. I know that there's been some questions raised by the University of Maryland system, and we look forward to working with them on coming up with a resolution. Madam Chair, I'm all about making your job easier, but just as importantly, making state employees' jobs easier, and that's why we have this legislation in. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll follow your lead. I'll either answer questions or pass it on to my panel.
Okay, are there any questions for the sponsor? Any questions? All right, if not, then we'll go to the lead proponent, Lance Kilpatrick from AFSCME Council 3. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the Finance Committee. For the record, my name is Lance Kilpatrick, and I am the Legislative and Political Director of AFSCME Council 3, representing 30,000 Maryland state and higher education employees. As the Senator noted, Chapter 24 of the laws of 2018 codified a process for exclusive bargaining unit representatives to be able to engage recently hired workers during new employee orientations. With the impact of the coronavirus pandemic, however, holes in the law as written have been exposed in a way that undermine the intent. When held, new employee orientations are now often done virtually, lessening the ability to personally engage. Some employers choose to stay online while the bargaining unit representative is presenting, chilling the ability of workers to engage. Technical difficulties can eat into the time allotted for presentation. Some employers wait months before holding new employee orientation. For a variety of reasons, a new employee may not be able to attend a scheduled orientation. This legislation will address those issues. And I'd like to address 2 issues that have been raised in opposition. Regarding the turning over of personal identifiable information, employers and unions throughout the nation and the state routinely share and coordinate this type of data. usually has to do with dues or other benefits like prescription drugs, dental, health insurance, supplemental insurance, things like that. This happens both in the public and private sector. The state and AFSCME have done so for a long time, this sharing, in a professional and secure manner for many years without issue. Workday IDs are used so that Social Security numbers do not need to be used, therefore adding a layer of security. Workday IDs also shouldn't take long to generate, but we are open to working with the USM to say that Workday numbers, which will be provided upon being generated or some such language, could be incorporated. Regarding meeting with employees, the bill is intended to solve a simple problem. An employee is hired. The union wants to be able to introduce itself promptly and in person, if at all possible, rather than waiting for an orientation program to occur much later, potentially. Regardless of whether a new employee wants to join the union or not, the union has a legal duty of fair representation to that employee. It only makes sense that an employee would want to know what their rights are. To accommodate pandemic conditions that sadly we are still in, the union can use Zoom or whatever form such as that. If a campus is closed for health purposes, the union will and must always honor that. Public health always has that priority. Ultimately, the employee is not even required to meet with the union. The employee always has the option to say, I'd rather not. I thank the committee for their time and patience, and we request a favorable reporting of this legislation.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, you must have done a great job. I don't see.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Winton Johnson, Ask Me Local 631. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, thank you. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Wynn Johnson. I'm the president of Ask Me Local 631, and I work for State Highway Administration. As a part of my work as a union representative, I have organized my district alone as of now, to get the regular engagement with my new employee, SHA employees. The challenge of SHA and MDOT do not hold employee orientations soon after people are hired. It can take up to 6 months to a year for a new person to get employee orientation. By this point in time, the new employee is not considered a new employee anymore because they've been there for that long period of time where they haven't had the opportunity to speak with their union representative to learn their rights and their rights and the nature of their difficult and the things that they will be coming up against and the good things that the union have done for them. That goes against the spirit and integrity of the existing law. Excuse me. What the bill before you does is make sure that the intent of the law is followed. That's when someone new is hired, they can find out within the first few days on the job what the union is about and their rights as a Maryland State employee. I am working with other districts in SHA and MDOT to set up meetings with new employees and share the information. But the point is the work is too hard as of now, seeing that we have a pandemic going on and people aren't getting to find out exactly what's needed and what they need to know with the union as a new employee. I want to thank you all for please listening to me and please vote yes on this legislation. And if you have any questions, I'm available for you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions of Mr. Johnson? I want to thank both of you because it does raise questions for me. If people go to any new job and when you go into a complex multi-campus system and you need to know how things work, what's expected, what the rules are, what opportunities there are, including your opportunity to be a part of a union if you would like to. it is very important that it not be so delayed. Justice too delayed is really justice denied. Anybody have any other question or comment? Okay. Well, we have a number of pieces of written testimony, but no other oral testimony. And
Chair,
yes,
I apologize. I just want to just say hello to Wynton Johnson, who's a good friend. And, you're just a tremendous leader in Prince George's County. So I just want to say hello to him. Good to see you, dog.
Thank you, thank you.
okay. So that ends the testimony on Senate Bill 717. Okay. And we're going next to Senate Bill 746. Let's see, Senator Gazone has arrived. And I see his smiling face. Senator, as you know, you have unlimited time to lay out the parameters of your bill. And your lead proponent is Joan Belli-Lacroix. And that person will have 5 minutes. Others will have 2.5 minutes each. No, that person is Pia Morrison, I'm sorry. And that person will have the 5 minutes and the others will have 2.5 each. And you're on, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Good to be with you. I have been with you before on this bill. This is not a new effort. It's been out there for a number of years. This is about allowing all of our the community colleges across the state provide for the possibility of collective bargaining through a process that I know we've all discussed many times over during various bills to collectively bargain for wages, benefits, working conditions. And that's obviously the nature of it. It's what is important about it in a sense. I want to point out what I don't think this is. I don't think this is about any comment on our community colleges and the status of them as they are as administrations. Quite frankly, I think our community colleges do a tremendous job. As a matter of fact, our my own community college, Howard, I have a tremendous relationship with the president there, and they've won many awards over the years for providing a outstanding working environment. So I don't think it's about that. Within the bill are things about how the process would work to become a collectively bargained campus, the election process for making that happen amongst the employees. All of that stuff's important. But I really only have one sort of simple message, and it's why I've done this bill before and believe so strongly in it. And that is that the 1935 National Labor Relations Act provided for the fact that all private industry, that individuals, employees in that virtually every business company out there must provide for the possibility of collective bargaining for their employees. It's simple. In the same breath, it created a system where the public realm did not necessarily have to require that. And as we well know, over the course of many years, we've been working in a piecemeal fashion to allow for various departments and agencies of state government to collectively bargain. And to me, it's all about fairness, right? Either we believe that workers should be allowed to collectively bargain or not. I mean, the details are in this bill, but the fundamentals are if as a country, we have decided that this is important, and it's this as far back as 1935, then why shouldn't the public sector essentially be responsible in the same light as the private sector is? To me, this is an equity issue. It's why I brought the bill before and why I bring it now. It's my hope that those colleges, those employees at those colleges that desire to do this and go through the process to make it happen ultimately end up as really even stronger partners with their administrations in an effort to do their very best to advocate for the needs of the college. I'm a strong, and have been for many, many years, proponent within the budget process of helping out our community colleges. And I believe that taken in the right light, that we can all work together, promote our community colleges to make them even better than they are today. I think this is a good step in that direction, and I urge your support.
Thank you. Are there questions for the sponsor? Well, I have a couple while you're thinking. Okay, I see Senator Bottle's hand, so go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Chairman Gazone, for your comments. And I really appreciate your support of the community colleges. I'm a graduate of Anne Arundel Community College, but it's my understanding in recent years, the state share to contribute to the colleges has gone down from like 34% to 26%. So are we doing anything to improve that share? Because it's true that the collective bargaining could add additional costs to the college budgets.
Right, so we absolutely are. As a matter of fact, this year within the budget, the governor has proposed a significant cut to the formula, to the CADE formula, without letting the cat out of the bag. I know that in conversations with the House, we are very intent on living up to the formula for this coming budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and I was just going to ask, what do you see as a couple of the most horrendous impacts on community college workers who haven't so far been able to have collective bargaining?
Well, horrendous impacts. I mean, they're probably better to answer that question than I am, but particularly during COVID, there have been a number of discussions and conversations that I've been part of where they felt like they weren't getting all the support they needed in protecting themselves as they move forward. I mean, as far as, again, from my perspective, and I tried to lay this out in my remarks, I know there are always problems out there. There are always concerns that workers have. The real question is, should they have the right to express them and have them addressed in a formalized process that is the same process that exists for all the private companies out there in the world? And to me, it's just a matter of fairness. There will always be things, but this gives them an opportunity to work through the system in a specific way.
Okay, Senator Reedy, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Chairman, Chairman Gazone, I know you have been a champion for community colleges and have been supportive when certainly I and others have come for help for community colleges in smaller and medium counties. I guess a concern that I have, hearing this really for the first time, is that our community colleges in places like Carroll County and on the Eastern Shore and Western Maryland are operating on very razor thin margins right now. Anything that adds to the cost, I mean, I know for the one in my county, my community college, and I'm a graduate of it, they're dipping into their foundation funds constantly to try to keep tuition down as low as possible. So all of these are tensions, trying to keep college affordable, try to obviously want to provide high quality education and pay our folks there as best we can. How do we balance that tension? Because I assume this is like it's going to happen and if we pass this bill and that's it. So, I mean, how do we balance that tension?
Well, I mean, if it happens and that's it, it isn't, that's it, in my opinion. I mean, it is a continuation of a process of what I believe is advocacy. I actually think that the employees and the administrations should logically be in the same mindset. They are both in a place where they can advocate together and work harder to press the legislature, their own local governments. I think, quite frankly, the potential for seeing more success financially for the institutions exists when they will have this opportunity.
Thank you. Senator Hershey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you saw the letter that was written from Dr. Coppersmith at Chesapeake College, but it mentions in the letter the historic underfunding and failure to fully fund the CAID formula. And kind of on the back of Senator Beidel's question, it doesn't appear that the governor's budget has fulfilled that promise. You didn't want to let the cat out of the bag, but it seems for some reason to be a struggle to fully fund CAID. Why is that, and why haven't we made that a priority of the General Assembly to make sure that CAID is fully funded?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to begin with, remember that the formula itself was from the legislature. It wasn't from any administration. It was developed that way. So in a sense, every year when we're presented a budget from the governor, almost every year, it's set up in a situation where he does not fully fund, and I don't mean just him, I'm talking about governors across the board,
right,
not fully funded the formula, which of course then puts us in a unique position because remember, we're presented a budget that we have to look at holistically across the board and the puts and takes from so many different things. Is it a priority of the legislature? It was a priority enough to ensure that there was a mandate so that if the governor should attempt to fund it at that level. What has typically happened is we would fund it beyond what the governor has funded, but not clearly not enough, not all the way up to the total level of the mandate. And that is on us. It's something we've been trying to work for over a number of years. And, I'm still very much committed to do that. I think we're going to see good movement this year. And I do see as we move forward. I mean, obviously I can't make any promises sitting here about that, but yeah, it's on us that we haven't done as good as we had hoped to do when the formulas were originally set up.
So to follow that, not a big fan of mandated spendings, but if we were to pass a bill like this, couldn't we mandate that CAID had to be fully funded? And this being very different from K through 12 education, because any funding that needs to be made up, if this bill causes tuitions to go higher, if the state isn't taking care of their share, and if the counties are struggling to make up their share, well, then it only falls onto the students in the increase in tuition. So how do we assure that passing something like this would not fall back on the students and increase tuition?
Well, I mean, if your suggestion was that we fully fund a mandate, the mandate already is established. So if the governor can choose not to fund mandates, that's a fundamental point. Let me shift slightly to what the future will bring. And future brings is the passage of question 1, which will actually help the legislature work within the budget process to shift monies around in an effort to see our priorities dealt with immediately without having to consider mandates. And so I guess the best thing I can say to you at this point is that with that authority, although without an absolute promise, I see the legislature, I see at least the existing budget committee and the existing body focusing on the community colleges at an even higher level.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chair Gazzoni, for bringing this bill to the body. We depend on the fiscal notes, Chair Gazzoni, and I'm looking at the fiscal note, and the fiscal note, because you folks are talking about all these dollars and everything, the fiscal note doesn't seem to be like it. We're not jointly assigned with your committee on this one. I mean, it's showing an actual cost that seems to be pretty small, related to the collective bargaining, particularly considering the fact that this legislation is also in a real way, an enabling legislation that would allow for these folks to get these rights that others already have and that they don't have. And then just on a more fundamental level, do you know that just by design, it costs more money if folks are organized versus not organized?
Well, never having personally gone through it, I can't say for sure. You might hear about that from others. But quite frankly, as I said, I think by working together in the long run, whatever costs there might be, I would believe would be overcome by the collective efforts of both administration and employees together as they move forward to advocacy.
Thank you, sir.
Let me ask a quick question, and I think Senator Hershey had his hand up again. If we were to pass this bill with a delayed implementation date, so we could get past most of the harm of this current pandemic, would that be workable from your perspective and given our budget process?
Sure. I mean, you can always put in a delay, maybe specifically for, in other words, you could move forward, I think, but focus simply on delaying the ability to negotiate on wages, if you will, financial benefits. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Senator Hershey.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say, I looked at the fiscal note as well, but I believe that only deals with the expenditures related to collective bargaining and not necessarily what the benefits may be if a collective bargaining agreement is reached.
Because that's what the bill does, Senator. I agree with you.
Yes, and so then what we're talking about, or at least what I was speaking about is, let's say, and I'm going to ask the proponents what they plan on asking for if they had these rights. I'm assuming that they will come back and have something to do with compensation that would obviously increase cost to the community colleges. Then we'd have to see what that does to overall expenses for the community college. And I think that's at least where I was asking from the fiscal perspective, what that could end up cost, or at least how those costs would be made up if collective bargaining was reached, and if salaries or benefits of those types of things were increased as a result of that. So I think maybe just two different parts of the, what's in the fiscal note and what's not in the fiscal note, but would need to be made up either through the state, local government, or through tuition.
And oh, did you want me to?
Sure.
Yes, Senator. I mean, the problem that you are raising, or the question you're raising, is one that does include some uncertainty. It just does. That's the reality. Because first off, this passes. We don't know what work campuses, communities are going to come together and even want to do this. So, it is theoretically possible on both ends. Everybody wants to do it. Nobody wants to do it. Somewhere in between. Yeah. And how to try to figure out how that would affect overall finances. I mean, it's a guess at this point. And then once the groups actually were able to form and negotiate with their administrations, what they would ask for, I mean, it could be any number of things. I guess I keep coming back to the beauty of that's the way it works all across America. In the private sector, they're required to do that. We ought to give the public sector the same right to do that. And it doesn't mean it necessarily passes. Just because you collectively bargain doesn't mean you're insured of getting what you're asking for. I think there's a lot of uncertainty between here and there in putting it all together.
Okay. All right. I don't see any other hands right now, so we're going on to the next. Senator Benson. All right.
Thank you very much. First, let me make the statement. I see this as creating a level playing field for the workers, having them to make a choice as to whether or not they want to be a part of a union or not. But let me ask the sponsor, have you looked in other states where community colleges have collective bargaining? And the second part of that is, in those particular states, was there a significant increase and a problem for students, the increase in tuition? Have you seen anything like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually have, there are a couple studies out there I know of. If I may, I think some of the folks that are going to testify after me are better equipped to answer that question. Now, they have some good history on that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, and Senator Klossmeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Gazzoni, my community college, Baltimore County, CCBC, has reservations and they're at the point of knowing that it's going to happen sooner or later, but they have some reservations. Would you be willing to work with them and work with me to go through some of their asks? Because I think we need to get a balanced approach on this. And one of the major things is they already do have 2 bargaining units, and they're worried that's going to completely upset the apple cart. So I would like, if you don't want to, but I am willing to work with them and have a work group and try to have some sort of compromise and just try to do the best we can for both sides.
As a son of Baltimore County, I'd be happy to work with.
Okay, thank you. So maybe next week we can do that.
Also, as a Baltimore County Senator, I would say when we say they don't want to, you mean the administration doesn't. You're not talking about the workers. So remember, both said, I'm sure
that's
the workers.
What I'm saying, but and I'll be upfront with you that Dr. Curtinitis spoke to me in January or December, and our thoughts was to get together and see what their asks are. But because of everything else going on, it never happened. So before I say yes, I'm going, I'm going for this bill, I want to hear what their asks are and see if we can give them some of them. So,
and I know, Senator, I'm sure you know, and I think there's written testimony in here, and actually your county executive even asked me if he could get on the panel, and it was already filled up. I know that he is very much in favor of this and interested, and obviously as one of the folks who hold large responsibility for funding of the community college, he understands that, and I know he would welcome any further conversation. I'd be happy to join with you. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We're going now to the main affirmative proponent, and that is Pia Morrison. You have 5 minutes. You got to unmute.
Yep. Thank you. Chair Kelly, Vice Chair Feldman, and members of the Senate Finance Committee. My name is Pia Morrison, President of SEIU Local 500, which is made up of over 20,000 working people in Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Virginia. Before becoming president of our union, I was an employee of Montgomery County Public Schools for 18 years. Our union represents the support staff of MCPS, family child care providers, faculty and staff at several colleges and universities, staff at nonprofits, and human service workers across our region. We're proud of our members who continue to serve on the front lines of public education in Maryland, even during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you to this committee and members of this body who are working to ensure our members are safe on the front lines with PPE, tests, vaccinations, and the Relief Act. On behalf of thousands of part-time community college faculty members across the state, thank you for hearing this bill. Many faculty members have sent in supportive testimony, and since the session is virtual this year, please be sure to take a look at the video hitting your inboxes. It's only a few minutes long, but it captures some of the enthusiasm of the workers at community colleges for this bill. They would otherwise be here in person testifying if it weren't for us being virtual. In previous years, I have joined with hundreds of them to support this bill. I want to acknowledge their presence today as they are participating virtually. Also, we are so proud to have the support of the Mayor of Baltimore and county execs from across the state, including County Executive Pittman, who is standing with us in support today. Thank you to our bill sponsor, Chairman Gazone, who has done a great job sponsoring this bill over the years. Right now, I want to make sure you know about some key provisions contained in this legislation. The bill's intent is simple. This bill gives community college workers the same right that 200,000 other public sector Maryland workers have, a choice. And if they want to move ahead with collective bargaining, the bill provides something even more important, a voice. This bill offers community college employees an important choice, a structure and a process for implementing collective bargaining so employees and management know what to expect. There are a few updates to the bill since it was last before you. One is ensuring that we meet the requirements from the recent Janus Supreme Court decision. The bill makes clear that Maryland community college employees have a choice about whether or not to join a union. But I believe they will choose to join with their fellow staff and faculties like many others, myself included, have done in the past. Another critical point is that this bill phases in bargaining over salary and wage increases. We know collective bargaining benefits educators, students, and our communities. And we know the pandemic has created harsh economic realities for workers and management alike. As we know, respect on the job is about more than salaries, and we will focus on those priorities now. I also think it's worth clarifying a couple of things this bill will not do. It doesn't require anyone to join a union or pay dues to a union. It doesn't require anyone to form a union. Unions are democratic organizations. We want workers to choose for themselves what's best for them and their families. This bill also does not impact any existing bargaining units at Maryland community colleges in Baltimore City and Baltimore, Prince George's, and Montgomery County. Maryland wouldn't be the first to make this change. Community college workers in 15 states already have this right. And in our state's own public sector, just about everyone already has the right to collectively bargain. Fortunately for us, we know this can work here in Maryland. Employees at Montgomery College have been unionized for over a decade. In that time, employees have been able to have their needs met and their voices heard. Montgomery College is less expensive, and Montgomery College attendees enjoyed the slowest tuition rate growth in the state for several consecutive years. Collective bargaining is a good thing. It protects workers. It leads to compromises between employers and employees and can help institutions' relationships with its employees run more smoothly. At community colleges across Maryland, employees' working conditions are students' learning conditions. When employees can bargain collectively with their administrations, Faculty, staff, and students will all benefit. I am testifying today from my own personal experience. I joined the union as a support staff professional at MCPS more than a decade ago because I wanted a voice at my workplace. And here I am today representing 20,000 members. I have seen the union change the lives of many people, including my own. I've seen collective bargaining change the lives of over 300 MCPS support staff professionals when we won a $15 an hour minimum wage. The union has given me not just a say at work, but also an entire family of working people in our area who come together to support one another in both good times and bad. It pains me to see so many Maryland educators denied the same fundamental right to collectively bargain that the rest of us enjoy, simply because our current laws overlook community colleges. By passing this bill, we can change this and afford educators at Maryland's community colleges the same rights as many other educators in the state. Senate Bill 746 is essential for Maryland community colleges employees who need a voice on the campus during COVID and during the post-pandemic recovery and beyond. We are very grateful to Chairman Gazzone for his leadership on behalf of community college employees. And today we're proud to be a part of a strong coalition of supporting organizations, including MSCA, Strong Future Maryland, AFSCME, Maryland Center on Economic Policy, CASA, McGeo, Progressive Maryland, New Faculty Majority, Jews United for Justice, LIUNA, UFCW Local 400, and more. Whether staff choose to organize or not, we believe, this coalition believes, the mayor of Baltimore and county execs agree, and we trust that you agree. They deserve the right to make that choice for themselves. Thank you so much, Madam.
But we're going over time and I've got to get to the other persons, but you're very impressive.
Thank you for your time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Augustine has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'm going to quote Senator Benson. It's my very wonderful neighbor, Pia Morrison, fellow Prince Georgian. I'm just so pleased that President Morrison is here with us, and just so proud of her and all that she represents for us. The President Morrison, I mean, you walked through the information which clearly demonstrated that unionized community colleges are not de facto more expensive, which we already know. But if you could share with me, what are some of the other things that non-economic benefits that workers would potentially be negotiating over? I mean, given all the things that are going on out here.
So what I've heard from adjunct faculty who are not currently allowed to collectively bargain is simple things such as professional development opportunities. As we know, because of COVID, so many of our education had to go virtual and online. And for some of our professors who were used to teaching in person, they had to ramp up to this new virtual environment. And that included some professional development that needed to happen. In addition to that, simple things like workspace to even meet with your students. A lot of times we found out that adjuncts are kind of carrying their offices around with them. And also, this group of workers are passionate about students having an affordable education. They want to be sure that they're able to provide the very best that they can to students. They want to be able to provide letters of recommendation. And so often not having the space and not being able, the right of first refusal, having some level of job security. When we think about COVID and the idea of people coming back into a physical space, this group of workers, like any other group of workers, wants to talk about the safety and the health and the well-being of the learning environment. And they should have that right to come to the table. Senator Augustine.
Thank you, President Morrison.
Thank you very much. Senator Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. President Morrison, at Baltimore City Community College, I thought that the staff or at least a portion of those staff was already represented. So I'm trying to figure out what effect would this bill have on Baltimore City Community College?
Well, this would simply give the other parts of the staff there that same opportunity to be able to come to the table with administration to bargain about employee rights and working conditions.
Which part of the staff are currently represented?
I apologize for not knowing the answer to that question. I can certainly find out for you,
Yeah,
but I think
you
it's,
know
I
if
think
there's
it's the
anybody-
support staff. I'm sorry.
Okay, is there anybody else on the panel that might have that information that I should ask?
I don't think there's anyone else on the panel that
Okay, well, I'll
that can
follow
answer
up.
that question.
That's okay.
It's
But we
so
can find out for
location
you, Senator
specific. but we
I
will
believe that's
find
correct.
out.
Thank you.
I'm
All
fairly
right.
certain it's the support staff.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Senator Hershey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Morrison, you had mentioned in your testimony that this is not just about salary and wage increases. My colleague just asked you about the non-economic benefits. Would you be willing to see an amended piece of legislation that would allow you to only bargain for those non-economic benefits and leave salary and compensation out of the collective bargaining agreements?
I don't think that, I think that we do have currently in the bill that we're setting before you today, there is a delaying in bargaining around compensation. But I certainly understand that right now we're in a space where we see the state needs to have some form of economic recovery. But respectfully, Montgomery College just went through a bargaining situation where there weren't resources around providing any form of additional compensation. And what that group of workers did was they went back to the table and they sat down and they negotiated around it. And they were able to forego the compensation. So in terms of we've already made that particular change to the bill, respectfully.
Thank you. And then in mentioning Montgomery County, you said that they were the least expensive or less expensive. What did you mean by that?
Meaning that over several consecutive years, their tuition at Montgomery College was lower than other community colleges.
Okay, so as we mentioned earlier, there's three components on how the community colleges are funded. I'm assuming that Montgomery County was in line with the normal CADE funding as well, so they didn't receive any more of that. But and if they didn't raise in tuitions, then obviously the only thing left was that Montgomery County government itself was able to make up any differences in potentially cost increases. Is that accurate? Or were there just no cost increases overall this period of time?
Well, I can't speak to the entire time. I can simply speak to the research that we've done around collective bargaining and the impact on tuition increases. And we can tell you that respectively, and we have the data to prove it, that for several consecutive years, Montgomery College with faculty with collective bargaining were able to maintain tuition costs so that it didn't impact students negatively. And I know that that's been something that's been mentioned on this committee several times.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I'd like to find out further if you might be able to find out what the county's input. I mean, Montgomery County has about a $6 billion operating budget, far exceeds the counties that I represent, of which I have two of the community colleges under question here. So if Montgomery County Community College has been able to hold down tuition rates because of the increased contribution of the government itself, I think that's important to know going forward. So if you have that information, or maybe I can ask one of my Montgomery County colleagues if they could find that out for us, I'd appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Are there other questions for this witness? You're a great witness. That's why they ask you so many questions. I just wanted, before this witness leaves, to say that when we collectively bargain and when it's done well, the whole focus isn't on just the economics. The economics are very important. Working conditions, and I worked for 45 years in colleges in the state of Maryland, where I could see even graduate teaching assistants as well as others carrying things. They didn't even have a desk that was dedicated when they needed to meet with students, carrying their coats around with them, no dedicated phone line. Your students would really benefit from better working conditions from the people who are the professional and the teaching and the other staff, so that students could have access to them, have privacy or confidentiality for as they discuss their achievement or lack thereof, or impediments to achievement and so on. And if we do this right, we're going to increase enrollments significantly. If people really see the value that you can get from being in Maryland Community College, and many of the essential workers that today are really struggling would be paying more taxes to help others to come behind them. Okay, I'm going to stop, get off my soapbox.
Thank you, Chairwoman Kelly.
So far today. Okay.
Could have had you testify.
Okay, let's go to
so
Cheryl Bose from Maryland State Teachers Association.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Great to see you and members of the committee and my own Senator Klassmeyer. I'm Cheryl Bose. I'm a teacher in Baltimore County, serving as the president for the Maryland State Education Association, representing over 75,000 educators in pre-K to 12 schools. As the great speaker before me pointed out much of the information, but over 200,000 Maryland public workers have the right to bargain. This bill will give our community school workers enabling legislation so they can choose and have the right to collectively bargain. It doesn't automatically say that they are unionized. They will have that choice and make that choice on their own. And to Senator Augustine's point and others, and President Morrison pointed it out, it's a false narrative to say just because you collectively bargain that that's going to increase the need for money or tuition increase. As you all have stated and questioned, that's a false narrative. There are many things at the table to talk about. As Senator Kelly just said, working conditions, livelihood. Not only could it increase tuition, but it'll help us retain the workers at the community college, and people will want to go work there. To Senator Klassmeyer's point about President Kurtenitis, if several of the employee groups are already able to collectively bargain, then you are in essence silencing those that don't have the right to collectively bargain. And as Senator Benson said, we need to level the playing field and give people a voice so that they can bring issues to the administration, often finding efficiencies and better working and learning conditions. Just recently, President Biden stated, unions lift up workers, both union and non-union, but especially Black and brown workers. This is a chance to have a voice. This is not an increase automatically in tuition or pay or anything else. This is the right to give workers a voice in their working and learning conditions for our students. So we ask you to vote favorably for our Senate Bill 746 and allow workers to have a level playing field and share in the responsibility of providing a quality community college education. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of this witness? Okay, we're going next to the Honorable Stuart Pittman, a County Executive for Anne Arundel County.
Thank you, Chairwoman Kelly, and all the members of the committee. And thank you, Senator Gazon, for your great job explaining all of this and advocating for it. And thank you to my Senator Bidle for weighing in and being on this committee as well. I'm one of 7 county executives plus the mayor of Baltimore who've signed on in support of this, representing the 7 largest jurisdictions that are, we calculate about 80% of the population of the state of Maryland. And it's interesting that we've all signed on in support, because all of us every year have to go through the budget process and are confronted with demands to increase pay for the adjunct faculty and the employees at community colleges. And we have a great community college in Anne Arundel County. I always say it's the best in the state, but I probably shouldn't say that in this setting. But our leadership there, our board there, really do care about their employees, and they advocate for them at budget time, and they request wage increases that I often am not able to deliver on. So one might question why it is that I would come here and advocate for collective bargaining for those employees. And the answer is really just that that I believe in it. If I were working there, I would want to know that I had that choice to be able to vote in favor of having a union and bargaining. And I've talked to some employees who feel that way as well. And I think most importantly, when I do budget town halls, we do 7 every year, we hear the organized employees of departments coming and advocating. So the fire department, the police department, the teachers are there at those budget town halls, and they're asking for support for those departments and those institutions. And we have not had that with our community college. And I am always preaching about how wonderful community colleges are and how important they are to our economy, and our workforce development team works with them all the time because they're so important. And if we had those employees there advocating, I think the message would get through, and it would be a benefit to those community colleges. So I think it's good for community colleges in general. I don't think it necessarily means additional pay for those employees. I think they could certainly use it, and I hope eventually it will become that. But it really just is that I think it's a healthy thing, and I think all of us in the big 7 counties think it's a healthy thing. It's been a long time coming, and so we hope that you will support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of this witness? Your testimony is most appreciated, and I'm glad you pointed out how many of your colleagues in other jurisdictions share your perspective. Okay, let's go to Joan Bevilacqua.
Dear members of the Finance Committee, I'm Joan Bevilacqua, and I'm an adjunct professor at Howard Community College and Prince George's Community College. I support Bill SB 746, Education, Community Colleges, Collective Bargaining. I deserve a right to decide for myself whether I want to be represented by a union. This is a fundamental right that over 200,000 other public sector workers enjoy, and community college employees should not be denied this basic right. COVID-19 has made my teaching more difficult, and the inconsistency in additional support has been paralyzing during this pandemic. Last March, we went home to redesign our courses, to go online with little or no help or support for that work of redesigning. We spent hours in training with no compensation, and I've invested my own money purchasing equipment needed to continue to present my classes. As an adjunct, I should be respected and protected for my work with enough representation and resources on the job. Without collective bargaining, we have no say on the terms and conditions of our contracts or our working conditions. Without collective bargaining, we have been left to the arbitrary whims of the college's administration. With collective bargaining, we can negotiate commitments to future compensation enhancements, from supporting job security, annual appointments, professional development funds, joint labor management committees, rank advancement, secured working and stable conditions and schedules. Our working conditions are our students' learning conditions. If you've spoken to one passionate professor, you've spoken to us all. We understand and care how important we are to the future of our country, and we need to collectively have a voice through a union. We need to have a seat at the table. We need to have rights. We need to have a union. This is the year to make this change. I ask you to vote yes and strongly urge a favorable committee report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions for this witness?
I can answer some of the questions that were asked before also.
I wish we could do it that way, but we can't.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to Dr. Bernie Sadusky, representing the Maryland Association of Community Colleges, and he's they are unfavorable. I know in your heart you're favorable, but.
Okay, well, thank you, Madam Chair, for that kind introduction. I am Bernie Sadusky, Executive Director from the Maryland Association of Community Colleges. You have my written testimony, so I'm not going to read that. Our primary opposition to this is about funding. And I see my good friend Cheryl Bose there. And we would certainly like to have their formula for funding, but let's get beyond that. What we're really looking for is a defined source for funding. And history shows us that the state has been inconsistent. I mean, 8 out of the last 14 years, we've been rebased to a loss of over $100 million. Last year, we lost $36.2 million in a rescission. And I say that because if this process is to work, we have to have some kind of agreement that we have a fiscal partner in this process. So if it's full CAID, that's great. And if it's not full CAID, then what we're looking for is our primary source for funding is local government. When it comes down to us, it is a two-edged sword to try to raise tuition. The students cannot afford it. They stop out because they work part-time. So we know that putting this on the back of students is just not a solution. So who's left? Local government. So what we say is this: if local government is good with it, then we're good with it, because now we have a funding source and a partner. And from what I've heard and read, you have a lot of folks that said, yeah, we're willing to do that. But we haven't heard everyone say that. So what we're saying is this legislation should include some type of provision that requires local government approval to say, yes, we know that this is good for employees, and yes, we know that we're going to be your partner when we fund this. There are other logistical issues with, and I'm just going to mention two and just move it on. The bill calls for 6 bargaining units, a maximum of 6. So unlike state negotiations, these are campus by campus negotiations. So if we were to maximize 6 times 16 community colleges, and I know that's the extreme, that's 96 negotiations going on in any given year. I mean, that just really is unsettling. It's not workable, but you can fix it. The second thing is that because we are a local mission-driven institution, we do a lot of interest courses. We do a lot of workforce sequencing courses, and we have hundreds of part-time faculty. Some of those people teach this year, and they may not teach for another year, or they may not teach because there's not a need for 2 years. What we're looking for is quite simply the same definition that the unions point to Montgomery County. They say that's a great contract. They identify by definition of what a part-time faculty looks like. We would be absolutely happy to have that language in this bill. The same with, we go to Montgomery County, which the unions always point to, they have 3 bargaining units. They don't have 6 bargaining units. So what I'm saying to you, there are logistical issues that I think reasonable people can resolve. I think they are resolvable issues. I would say to you that every time we've had a high impact piece of legislation, like the sick leave bill, like ban the box bill, there have been issues that were very difficult to implement, but reasonable minds in a conference setting were able to, in very short period of time, resolve those issues. That's what we're asking for. That's what we're all about. It's not about employees' rights. This is about funding and making this a workable bill. And I will stop, try to answer any questions. And I know we have some other testimony from community colleges.
Sure. It's very helpful to hear you lay out as you have what your reservations are and the variables that need to be acted upon. It occurs to me that if we could amend the bill so that bargaining over wages and so on could be delayed for a set number of years in the near term, and if we could get in some of the definitions that you say Montgomery County has in that you find helpful, and maybe see if, given this unique nature of community colleges, we could reduce the number of bargaining units if it could be still workable from a practical perspective. Then I'm wondering if we had, and I'm glad the sponsor is still here, a work group not with a whole lot of legislators, maybe one or two legislators who know budgets and one or two who know education, but with the entities that would have to implement this, including somebody representing those 7 county execs who already are attuned to the need. Would people be willing to participate in helping us? And we don't have a lot of time given the short remainder of the General Assembly, and we hope not to have to shut down early. So if we called on people, if we tried to organize.
And I dropped one and I want to roll this chair.
We will come to the table.
Let me see you raise your hand if you'd be willing to serve. Okay, I would. Anybody else there that's willing to serve? Any of our witnesses today willing to serve, you know, collective bargaining? Okay. All right. We'll see what we can do. I'm going to work with Chairman Gazone and we'll see if we can't get something together before the end of next week to see where we could go with this.
That we greatly appreciate it, Madam Chair.
Okay, now we have, Senator Augustine, did you have it?
I did, Madam Chair. I just want to follow up on that real quick. Because the position Mr. Sadusky came in with was an unfavorable position. Given what Chair Kelly just said, right? Given the process that she talked about, can you change your position? Are you just fundamentally against the right for people to organize? Or are you open to that? Because the money is a separate conversation. Are you open to that and able to, get this thing moving forward?
We are not philosophically against the concept. We're against the implementation without a fiscal source. And I think that answers your question. And would be willing to serve with common minds, including yourself, on the logistics to make it a workable bill.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going next to Maureen Murphy from the College of Southern Maryland.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Kelly and everybody else. And I concur with what Dr. Sadusky just said. Just to contextualize a little bit for you, I'm 32 years in community colleges. More than half of that has been in a collective bargaining environment. And I have served on both sides of the bargaining table. My objection is to some of the provisions in this bill, not as bargaining as a social construct. First of all, I think, we've talked a little bit about the concerns about the fiscal impact. We operate, as our colleague from Carroll County just said, on a shoestring. And really and truly, additional expense compromises who we are. Since the Truman Commission report of 1947, community colleges have been charged with serving the underserved. We're democracy's colleges. Our doors are open to everyone. I believe we're social justice through education, and we serve overwhelmingly the majority of low-income and minority students. This mission is sacred to us, and we do this work because we believe in its value. Though we're the least funded sector of higher education, we continue. Our students, and especially right now, are socially and economically fragile, which makes our enrollment volatile. Regardless, we continue, and our faculty are highly qualified and well-educated, and they're the core to our success. Community college faculty have the same academic credentials as university faculty. However, they work at community colleges because they believe in our mission. Teaching is at the core of what we do, and many community college presidents, including me, spent considerable time in the faculty ranks. That's why when SB 746 treats community college faculty differently from the faculty in the university system in Maryland, I have to ask why. Community college faculty are professionals who deserve the same professional considerations as university faculty who are granted the ability to meet and confer. Meet and confer respects their professionalism, and to treat them differently from USM faculty just really doesn't value their worth. I mentioned a moment ago our enrollment volatility, and community college enrollment ebbs and flows with the economy, and you would expect that because we're open door. This fall, community college enrollment plunged over 10% nationally. Enrollment vicissitudes sometimes result in schedule shifts, And to accommodate our uncertain enrollment, we employ part-time or adjunct faculty, whom we also value. And many of these faculty are, as the previous testimony, or somebody who is working part-time and wants a voice. And others are our own full-time staff who are already at the college, who are teaching a class each term. Some are experts who come in to teach unique specialty classes. And some are people who are just filling time in retirement. So SB 746 doesn't allow for those varieties of adjunct faculty, which is why we support Montgomery County's definition, because that provides some consistency and it really gives us something to work with.
Okay.
Our objection, as I said, is not to bargaining, but it's to the letter of what's in this bill. We really want something that's workable, that values our colleges, our work, our dedication to our mission, and the fragile populations we serve. For this reason, as well as those mentioned before, I really hope that we have an opportunity to talk about amending this legislation and coming to something that is workable. And I thank you.
Thank you very much. If I don't see a really piercing question, we need to hear two other people and get on to other legislation. Kevin Kennelly of MACO.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Kevin Kennelly here in opposition to Senate Bill 746. You have my written testimony. I'd like to highlight just a few points. First, a lot of what I'm going to say is along the lines of Mr. Sadusky's points. And when community colleges see a bill that they know is going to have a significant fiscal impact on their operations, they come to us for help because they know that counties are going to have to provide them with the additional funding to meet a new mandate, especially when the state share of the CAID formula falls short, which has typically been the case. And they come to counties because they don't want to raise student tuition, especially at a time when training and education opportunities are most needed. We don't oppose the policy argument here, but community college enrollment is down and they're struggling. MACO is working to resist a provision in the BRFA that would cost our local community colleges around $150 million over the next 5 years. So, I mean, as you've heard earlier and as you've discussed, some counties may be able to shoulder the burden here more than others, but this one-size-fits-all approach could put significant pressure on county budgets and our limited local funds for schools, public health, public safety, and other essential services. The state has often had trouble living up to its funding obligation, and so without the proper funds to offset these additional costs, MACO would respectfully request an unfavorable report on Senate Bill 746. We are certainly willing to be at the table, and I thank you, Chair Kelly, for offering that. But without the proper funding, it's hard to support the bill, and we'd ask for an unfavorable as the bill is written.
Okay, and among the things we want to consider would be a delayed implementation date for any bargaining on wages and salary. Thank you. Let's go finally to Murray Hoy, Warwick Community College.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ray Hoy, Murray, president of Warwick Community College, Maryland Community College graduate, and been in the Maryland system for 45 years. So I appreciate this opportunity, and I taught as an adjunct for 13 years. This is about money. This bill is going to cause colleges to increase personnel to deal with multiple bargaining units. We're going to have to increase our legal costs, especially in the first year, and increase the annual costs associated with collective bargaining negotiated agreements. And those costs will either be borne by our students in the form of tuition increases and or program and service reductions, which we don't want to see, unless our support counties increase the budgets. And that's because there's no additional revenue coming from the state to enact this legislation. It's nothing more than an unfunded mandate if our employees choose to unionize. I get that, if they choose to unionize. As you've already heard, state funding has never met its CAID obligation in the 23 years since passage. The state's the minority partner in that funding relationship. In fact, statewide, the state only represents 22% of the operating revenue at our colleges. This is why collective bargaining needs to be a local decision. The people who have to pay for it, the people who are going to have to pay for it, need to be part of the decision-making process. And that's our counties, as we well know. And by the way, we have to recognize that they're going to be hit with an additional burden, which is the Kerwin local match. Now, we keep hearing how well this works in Montgomery College, and that there There are only 3 bargaining units there, not the proposed 6 units in this bill. But I want to take a moment to talk more about Montgomery and collective bargaining. Montgomery has the highest county contribution and the highest tuition fee rate in the state. They're at 177 per credit hour, and their county contribution is $144 million. Compare that with Baltimore County, which is a similarly sized institution that receives $51 million from Baltimore County. That's a significant difference, people. Their cost per FTE is $16,582. My institution's cost is $10,571, not unlike others. And our tuition rate at Warwick is $139 per credit hour. That's $38 less per credit hour than Montgomery's. So we actually have $6,000 less per student than Montgomery has to operate. And I know there's those who say it costs more to live in Montgomery County. And I agree with you, it does, but it doesn't cost 63% more. And that's the difference in funding that we're talking about, 63% per student. You know, with enough money, every institution can do this. And we should. So the state needs to step up, meet its funding obligation, and local governments who are expected to pay for the negotiated agreements need to be on board as well and understand their obligation. When they do, they can submit local legislation like Montgomery, Prince George's, and Baltimore County. I applaud Executive Pittman for his comments. He should introduce local legislation, as should those others who want to support this. But making this a statewide mandate, it shouldn't be a state initiative until CADE's fully funded. And you've heard that there are other issues in this bill that need amendments. The implementation deadline is unreasonably short. To have an October 1st of this fiscal year deadline to set up the infrastructure is almost impossible for us. I've talked to labor law firms and asked them, what's it going to cost us? And they said, to engage us, it's going to be about $200,000, and you probably need 2 more people in your human resources office. That's an upfront cost that we didn't budget for. And my budget's already been submitted to my support counties. That process is ongoing. So our budget for next fiscal year is already out there. We don't have these additional dollars in there. I appreciate the fact that we're not going to have to negotiate for salary increases in the future, but I'll be frank with you, even a small college with a poor budget, we were able to give a salary increase every year during the Great Recession. We made sure that we did that for our people. So there's a lot of things that we think need to happen with this bill. And we really appreciate the opportunity to come forward and sit down and negotiate those things, because this bill has looked similar every year until this year, where some changes were made for other issues. But thank you so much for this opportunity and your time.
Thank you. We appreciate everybody's point of view. We've learned something from everybody that we've listened to in terms of what might need to be amended, what might need to be delayed, and the fact that one size does not fit all, in case we were dumb enough to think that one size would work. It occurs to me that I hope you will look out for or listen up for the possibility of at least one more meeting that we could have with the sponsor and some interested members of this committee to see what we could do. Because if we do right, we're going to create taxpayers in your counties who can pay you more taxes to help you have the increased foundation fiscally that you need to fund whatever. Thanks so very much. And that ends the testimony on this bill. Okay. All right, we're going next to Senator Griffith, Senate Bill 801. Labor and Employment Economic Stabilization Act alterations.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Kelly, Vice Chair Feldman, and members of the Finance Committee. For the record, I'm Senator Melanie Griffith, representing District 25 in Prince George's County, here to present Senate Bill 801. Colleagues, you may remember last session I came in and presented a bill for your consideration that was Senate Bill 780. And it really was centered around notification for employees when there was going to be a closure in a business in our communities, and making sure that elected officials were aware and that the community had the information to prepare and respond. And so you all, at my request, and quite honestly, I cross-filed the bill for my delegate, the chair of the House Economic Matters Committee, and we were able to come up with a piece of legislation, and the bill was passed and adopted last year. During the interim, a group of stakeholders that were not on the side of the bill last session from the chamber, and identified a few issues with the bill that they were hoping we could correct this session. And so they approached me, and certainly looped in the stakeholders who brought the original bill to my attention. The proponents, opponents have been meeting off and on, and it is my hope that they will be able to produce some amendments that are consensus amendments. You've probably seen on your witness list and your list of testimony that we have folks that are in favor of the bill and folks that are opposed to the bill. And after watching you all's voting session last night, my desire is to spare you that process of having to go through this rigorous amendment process, and that the parties will come together and I'll be able to present to you some consensus amendments. So in the interest of time, I would like to turn the hearing over, if I could, Madam Chair, to the panel so that they can at least share with you the concept behind Senate Bill 801, the technical aspects, where there's consensus and where we're still working out some of the kinks, if that's all right with you in the committee.
That's fine. And your lead proponent will have 5 minutes and the others will have 2.5 minutes each. And that lead person is Andrew Griffin of the Maryland Chamber of Commerce.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, Mr. Vice Chairman, and members of the committee. Andrew Griffin here on behalf of the Maryland Chamber of Commerce to discuss Senate Bill 801. I want to start off by thanking the bill sponsor for introducing the legislation, and just briefly touch on what the senator had mentioned. Yes, we have been working with, in the interim, the proponents of last year's legislation to come up with some agreement on really what the chamber is viewing as some compliance related issues to help the employer community comply a little better with the changes from last year. They have offered to us a set of amendments and recommendations, many of which we will be accepting outright. There are 2 or 3 where we're still discussing, but I would say look forward to a handful of amendments to come in the coming days, just unable to get those buttoned up before frankly, the deadline for testimony today. So just going to some of the changes in the bill last year quickly, the purpose of the bill was to strengthen the state's Economic Stabilization Act, which is a state version of the Federal WARN Act. And the version, what you passed last year, made 3 big changes. One is it changed the state's program from a voluntary program to a mandatory program. And that's really where a lot of the compliance came in. The program is really written to be a mandatory program, not a voluntary program, not a mandatory program. And so there's some language changes that need to be made. There were changes made to notice provisions as it relates to when, how, and to whom notice is given. And finally, there was a fine instituted or put into statute of up to $10,000 a day for non-compliance of the notice. And so, like the sponsor mentioned, we met to identify what we thought were some of the low-hanging fruit areas that we could help employers kind of comply a little easier. And so the bill you have before you, Senate Bill 801, really what we did is we added a couple definitions of things that we thought the statute needed, and we clarified a few, again, going back to the switch of the program being voluntary to mandatory. Some of the definitions need to be clarified. The second major change, we made a change to the notice regarding elected officials. In the bill you all passed last year, there was a nod to notifying all elected officials for the jurisdictions in which an employer resides. The way that's being read, certainly by the department, I don't mean to speak for them, but that would include everybody from a city council member up to the county sheriff to the governor, which we know is not the intent of the sponsor or the proponents of the bill last year. So we're just looking to narrow that slightly. We remain open. If anybody, let's say as a member of the state Senate, you want to be notified, we're happy to include that but just looking to narrow that. And finally, and I think has become more important now, is the state law. We're mirroring 3 exceptions to the notice requirements that exist in federal law. I want to be very clear about what these exception requirements do and do not do. In a bona fide instance that a company cannot give notice by the statutorily mandated 60 days before a layoff. These exemptions are designed to alleviate them from the fine component. It does not exempt them from giving notice. In fact, employers still must give notice as soon as practicable under the language in this bill. But what it says is for one of these 3 exception areas, in the exception of, or the instance of a natural disaster, of a company is impacted by a flood or an earthquake, they reasonably cannot give 60 days notice that there will be layoffs. 2, for the instance that a company primarily operates under contracts. This happens a lot here in Maryland with our government contractors. If they lose a contract, which would require them to lay off employees in less than 60 days, they're still needing to give notice. What we're saying is between that 60th day and maybe the 40th day, when they learn of the loss of a contract, they would not be held liable for the fine, up to $10,000 a day fine for that. And then finally, unforeseen business circumstances. We saw, unfortunately, a lot of this, if you guys remember just a year ago, today, March, when you all passed the bill last year with the COVID situation, we were seeing the governor come out on a Monday or a Wednesday and announce that businesses were going to either have to close completely or partially on that Friday. And so when a business learns on Monday that, hey, they have to lay off their employees, they're expected to tell them, 5 days from now, you're going to have layoffs or there will be reductions. But without the language in this bill before you, a business could be on the hook for, let's say, that 5-day lead out, 55 days of a fine, which up to $10,000 is over $500,000 in fine. And so we're just, again, mirroring. I think I want to also preface that we are not married to specific language in this bill. As long as we are able to accomplish kind of these 3 buckets, we are happy to take suggestions and changes from members of the committee. And again, like I said, we continue to work with the proponents of last year's bill to come up with more refined language to introduce to you all. So with that, I will stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions, urge a favorable report, and kind of say, look in your inboxes in the next couple of days for some amendments. So
thank you. Are there any questions for this witness? Okay, you did a good job of cluing us in. Paul Bergen of Shaw Rosenthal LLP. You have 2.5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and honorable members of the committee for allowing me to speak in favor of Senate Bill 801. My name is Paul Bergen, and I'm a labor and employment attorney with Shaw Rosenthal. The Economic Stabilization Act includes a penalty of up to $10,000 per day for failure to give notice to all required parties. This is in contrast to the federal law, which provides for a $500 per day penalty. Given the severity of the potential penalties for violations, it is imperative that employers are clear as to their obligations. As Mr. Griffin said, additional clarity is needed as to some of the bill's requirements. Additionally, the federal law contains well-settled exceptions that have been carefully designed and applied to the balancing interests of businesses and employees. The current law does not have any exceptions similar to those under the federal law for unforeseeable business circumstances, natural disasters, or a faltering company seeking financing. We have seen firsthand during the pandemic that employers with the best of intentions and the utmost forethought cannot always provide the 60 days notice that is required. We saw governmental restrictions limiting or prohibiting business operations, which were impossible for companies to foresee in advance. Furthermore, advance notice is not possible where businesses lose facilities in disasters such as fires or floods. Employers also should not be required to give notice when doing so will preclude it from obtaining capital or business to permit continued operations. Businesses in this position should not be faced with an additional roadblock to the lifeline needed to stay afloat. There should be exceptions permitting shortened notice in such circumstances. Senate Bill 801 requires that the employer provide notice as soon as possible if utilizing an exception, thereby not prejudicing employees subject to a reduction. Employers should not be put in the untenable position where it is impossible to comply with the law, and failure to comply comes with onerous penalties. The current law also requires advance notice of a relocation, regardless of whether jobs are lost. Now, the intent of the statute is to provide notice of job losses, not a relocation that could potentially result in expansion. The bill revises the statute to apply to relocations that result in job losses, aligning with the statute's intent. For these reasons, I respectfully request the committee return a favorable report on this bill. Thank you for your time, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from Mr. Bergen? All right. And Michael Wilson, UPCW Local 400.
Good afternoon, Chair Kelly and members of the Finance Committee. Mike Wilson here today on behalf of the members of the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 400. We represent over 10,000 members in Maryland who've been working on the front lines of the ongoing pandemic in grocery, retail, food distribution, law enforcement, and healthcare. As Senator Griffith and the proponents of these changes have said, we have been in conversation with the chamber about potential amendments to this, and if we can, we do want to work things out in a way that would land us in a place that we're all comfortable with. But as the amendments that are in the current bill, we are opposed to. Just a reminder, I think Senator Griffith brought it up, but the reason that this was brought before the committee last year was because at the end of 2019, hundreds of Maryland working families in the communities they support were hit with the devastating news right before the holidays that Shoppers Food was closing dozens of stores in the state. It was an announcement made right before the holidays and with only the notice required by the federal Warren Law. Shoppers' parent company, SuperValue, which is based in Minnesota, had recently been acquired by an even larger out-of-state company, United Natural Foods, based in Rhode Island. Despite the size of this company, because some stores did not meet the threshold of the number of full-time employees required under the Federal Warren Act protections, not all of the employees were given even the 60 days notice required under that law. Because these employees were members of our union, we were able to fight for and negotiate some terms to ease the transition, but they were hurt by the fact that the Maryland Economic Stabilization Act at that time was just suggestions and did not have enforceability. These members came before you last year with their stories urging you to make the stronger protections of the Maryland law enforceable, which we greatly appreciate you did. Working families across the state were served by the passage of the bill last year. Now these changes that are being proposed, some of them would make the Maryland bill no better than the federal law that failed those families last year. There are 20 states that have provisions that are stronger than the federal law. And a lot of the changes that are being proposed here would create exemptions and loopholes that would give other large companies an excuse not to comply, further harming working Marylanders. Some of the things around attempting to increase the number of employees needed in the state, adding some definitions that are, we feel are too vague, attempting to allow companies to move locations and exempt themselves. Again, we feel like this is about a job for an individual, not the total number of jobs that are left after they move. And some of the loopholes we feel like are too vague around what business conditions would allow someone to exempt themselves. So again, we're going to continue to work with the chamber to try and come to agreement on amendments that we can propose, but we do have some big concerns about some of the things that are in the bill currently. And again, we appreciate Senator Griffith for introducing this legislation last year, for working with us and with the chamber on proposed changes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll hold the bill as long as we possibly can to give you and the sponsor time to work on it to fix these rough spots. It sounds like very important legislation. If it can be all worked out, I think we'll be in a better world. So keep tuned. Are there any questions of this witness? All right, thank you very much. That ends the testimony on Senate Bill 801.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, we're going now to Senator Carter, Senate Bill 757. Senator Carter, you obviously have the time you need to lay out the parameters of your bill. And as with all of our lead proponents, and you've designated Denise Gilmore, we will have 5 minutes from that person, or up to that amount of time, and 2.5 minutes for all other witnesses today. So we'll hear from you now.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you all members of the Finance Committee for your attention to this important bill. I'm very proud to present Senate Bill 757 today. Public defenders, individually and collectively, are our sheroes and heroes. They're so important that they're mentioned in the Bill of Rights. Every day in this state, they protect our most precious freedom, which is liberty. For many thousands of Marylanders, public defenders epitomize the meaning of liberty and justice for all. Yet with all of that and how important public defenders are, they have been left out of our state employee merit system, our state merit system. And so a few things I want to let you know about the bill. The Office of the Public Defender has the largest number of at-will employees in the executive branch of Maryland state government. Under this bill, the Office of the Public Defender will be required to classify assistant public defenders into the professional service category under the state personnel management system. It would also place deputy public defenders in the executive service and district public defenders in the management service under the state personnel management system. In most of state government, employees are categorized as executive, managerial, professional, and skilled. While executive and managerial employees are generally at will and serve at the pleasure of an appointing authority, the professional and skilled employees are protected from discipline and termination without cause. Assistant public defenders with the Office of the Public Defender are currently categorized as special appointees, which means they can be terminated at any time and for no reason. This legislation attempts to bring the Office of the Public Defender in line with the rest of the state by requiring that state employees who would typically be described as professional, management, and executive service be so categorized at the Office of the Public Defender. For assistant public defenders, a move into the professional service would mean that they could only be hired based on merit and terminated or disciplined for cause. Assistant public defenders meet the definition of professional service under the state personnel management system in the same way that social workers in their office do. But social workers already have been appropriately categorized as professional service. Under the state personnel law, professional service is defined in SP 6-402 as follows. A, except as otherwise provided by law, a position in the executive branch of state government is in the professional service if the position, 1, requires knowledge of an advanced type in a field of science or learning customarily acquired by a course of specialized intellectual instruction and study, and 2, normally requires a professional license, advanced degree, or both. Of course, all lawyers in the Office of the Public Defender meet each of those 2 important requirements. So this bill is important if an employee is constantly looking over their shoulder, never knowing when or how they might be terminated. Morale can never be high for those employees. They're likely to become more fearful in their jobs. They know that there are minimal protections from being terminated for reasons completely unrelated to job performance. It's one thing to ask high-level state officials to take that risk, but it's something else to impose that risk on professionally qualified long-term employees with non-political jobs, such as assistant public defenders. We do have one technical amendment, which you all should have, and that amendment was simply left out of the original draft of the bill. The amendment provides access to the grievance procedure for attorneys in the Office of the Public Defender, which is completely in line with the original intent of the bill. I posit to you that Senate Bill 757 is a common sense bill, and it is the right thing to do for our state employees in the Office of the Public Defenders, who I repeat are our daily sheroes and heroes upholding the United States Constitution in our courtrooms across the state. Assistant public defenders fulfill the duty of ensuring that all Marylanders have access to indigent defense. That's how we should want this system to work. Let's make sure our public defenders have the opportunity to serve out their careers as other state employees do, without fear of being terminated for no reason at all. For these reasons, I would ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for our sponsor? Senator Benson. You got to unmute yourself, Senator.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Senator, for presenting this bill. I think it's extremely important. But tell me a little bit about how did this happen in the first place? What is the history? What is the history behind this? I mean, you have these people who are highly qualified and they can be terminated at will. And then you have the public defenders who fit in another category. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, so I will, there may be another witness, maybe Denise Gilmore, my star witness, can shed greater light of the history, but I can just tell you that I believe it's just the way that they were created and the way that they were created under the executive.
Yes, that would be very helpful if I were to know that. Okay, thank you very much. I'll just wait. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, then we'll go next to Denise Gilmore, and you have 5 minutes. You're the lead proponent of the bill.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Denise Gilmore, and I'm Field Director with AFSCME Council 3. Just to quickly address Senator Benson's question, it's a great question. Originally when the office was formed, the attorneys who were performing the representation were generally on like a contract basis, private attorneys doing this, in addition to their private practice. Now we've seen a shift where, many of the line attorneys are full-time permanent staff. So, that explains a little bit of the history, but we're very grateful to Senator Carter for introducing this important legislation. She did a wonderful job explaining it. SB 757 would bring the Office of the Public Defender more in line with the rest of the state. For our assistant public defenders, a move into the professional service would mean that they are no longer at-will special appointees and that they could only be hired based on merit and terminated or disciplined for cause. This move very much aligns with recommendations made by the American Bar Association. In 1992, the ABA published 10 principles of public defense delivery systems. In principle number 1, the ABA recommended that selection of the chief defender and staff should be made on the basis of merit. The chief defender should be appointed for a fixed term of years and be subject to renewal. Neither the chief defender nor staff should be removed except upon a showing of good cause. They went on to provide further commentary that the selection of the chief defender and staff should not be based on political considerations or any other factors unrelated to the ability of persons to discharge their employment obligations. Hiring and promotion should be based on merit, and the defender program should encourage opportunities for career service. These themes also are contained in other national standards for defenders. The National Legal Aid and Defender Association, for example, recommends in their guidelines for recruitment, hiring, promotion, and removal of defender office personnel that defender promotion policies should be tied to merit and performance criteria, and removal of staff attorneys should be only for cause, except during a fixed probationary period, which an office may employ for newly hired attorneys. In 2010, the Maryland General Assembly passed legislation that partially conformed with these recommendations. SB 97 of 2010, enacted as Chapter 223, created a term for the chief public defender in Maryland and required that the position can only be removed for cause. Left out from this effort, however, were the staff attorneys for the OPD. Assistant public defenders are still classified as special appointees. SB 757 corrects this by placing the assistant public defenders into the state merit system, removing them from special appointee status and into this professional service category under the state personnel management system. The SPMS was designed to place a fair and equitable system for processing personnel actions, including recruitment, selection, training, discipline, leave, transfers, and discharges. While there may be reasons for some types of employees to be special appointees, it's hard to find one for the assistant public defenders. The more appropriate employment category for these employees is the professional service, which is defined under state personnel law as a position in the executive branch that requires knowledge of an advanced type in a field of science or learning and normally requires a professional license, advanced degree, or both. This is an important bill. When employees live in constant fear that they will be terminated without just cause, it has a detrimental impact on morale and turnover increases. This impacts the quality of representation clients are able to receive. Public defenders are the frontline workers in this important and historic moment as we reimagine public safety and justice in our state, so we need to support them. SB 757 also alleviates concerns about transparency and hiring promotion process that have long plagued the OPD. Currently, 11 of 12 Maryland District public defenders are white. The vast majority of the clients served by the OPD are not. This is the right thing to do. Assistant public defenders organized last year to form a local with AFSCME. While SB 757 is not a collective bargaining bill, we were encouraged when the Chief Public Defender Paul DeWolf said to the Baltimore Sun in an August 4th article announcing their efforts to join AFSCME that our employees are dedicated advocates who fight for our clients every day. In these exceptionally challenging times where there are widespread budget cuts and life-threatening risks from COVID, they are now fighting for themselves. We couldn't agree more. Like so many other state employees who by profession advocate for others, this turn inward to advocate for yourself isn't always the easiest one to make. Assistant public defenders deserve merit conversion because they have a very challenging job with lower pay than their lawyer counterparts, although they're always the first to tell you that they don't do it for the money. They choose to do this work because they want to serve the community, but they should at least have some job protections. Merit conversion does not mean that management can't fire bad employees or that they no longer have control over who they hire. It simply means that these positions would now be subject to the normal merit system procedures most other state agencies provide. The OPD hires core staff in the office under the merit system, and it is unfair to have special appointees working alongside merit employees who have more rights when there is no reasonable explanation for those employees to be special appointees. There is a technical amendment needed in the bill. We urge this committee to please provide a favorable report on SB 757 with this amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there questions for this witness? Okay. Thank you so much. Let's go next to David Pyle, AFSCME Local 423.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, including my own Senator Jennings. First, I'd like to thank Senator Carter for proposing this bill. My name is David Pyle. I am a member of AFSCME Local 423, and I have served as an assistant public defender in Baltimore City, Dorchester, and Wycomico counties. I joined the agency through a desire to speak the unheard truths of my clients to those in power. It is ironic that I have an active fear about testifying here today to speak my own truth. Since my arrival at the Office of the Public Defender, I have witnessed several attorneys who mentored me terminated from the office in their professional prime without any apparent reason related to their performance on behalf of their clients. These losses were and are deeply personal, but rarely discussed, like a relative who has died but is immediately forgotten. Many ask, could I be next? The cost of these firings on morale lingers. 21-year career, there has been a slow and steady erosion of trust among colleagues and a corresponding decline in the family atmosphere that attracted so many, including myself, to a career in public defense. Our young lawyers deserve better. being a public defender is not just a job, it is a calling. The required defense traits of candor, zealous advocacy, and loyalty to a client above all things cannot and must not be turned on and off to consider the consequences of speaking. The issue of merit protection for assistant public defenders is ultimately larger than me and my colleagues. Merit protection reaffirms and strengthens our professional obligations. It will engender an unfettered communication of truth, even when those truths apply to our own agency itself. In short, merit protection protects our clients. I urge a favorable report on Bill 757, and thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Pyle? All right, we'll go next to Cynthia Frezzo, Ask Me Local 423.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Madam Chair and Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you again to Senator Carter for bringing this bill. I am Cynthia Frezzo. I'm a member of Ask Me Local 423, the Maryland Defenders Union. Just to echo what Senator Carter was mentioning earlier, assistant public defenders do a lot. We represent the vast majority of indigent defendants in the state of Maryland. But what I want to convey to the committee is that we don't just go into court and fight for our clients. We help house the homeless. We reunite families. We develop reentry plans. We connect people with rehabilitation, with jobs, with schools, with mental health treatment, and a host of other services that enhance both individual well-being and public safety overall. Basically, we do the work of countless government agencies and state employees, but we get the protection of none. And that's why we need merit status, to ensure that our work is valued, protected, and treated fairly. This lack of protection, it's led to a lot of problems. As was mentioned before, reduced morale is certainly a big problem, high turnover, and lower retention overall. As an example of that, I've been with the agency since the fall of 2016, just slightly over 4 years. When I started, there were 15 attorneys in our office, including myself. Of those lawyers, only 7 remain. In the years between, we didn't just hire 8 new lawyers and keep them. We just kept turning people over. More people kept coming and leaving year after year after year. And that's certainly not surprising. This job is a stressful one, but it's even more stressful and discouraging when you keep frontline attorneys on permanent probation, when they could lose their benefits, compensation, and pensions at any time for any reason. This is bad for the agency's bottom line. It's bad for caseloads. It's bad for institutional knowledge. But most importantly, it's bad for our clients and bad for our communities, because it discourages good lawyers from sticking around and fostering their careers here. Now, I love my job, I love my coworkers, and I love my clients. I want to invest in Maryland and invest in the pension and invest in the communities that I serve. But it really does terrify me that at any point that could all be taken away. And that's why so many people leave. It's not just the job and the stress, it's that we're kept in this constant, unstable, and unpredictable position because our work is not protected. And that's why I'm asking this committee to please pass a favorable report on SB 757, because assistant public defenders deserve fair treatment, protection, but most of all, because our clients deserve fair and effective representation. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Let me ask one question. Do you have a sense that lack of adequate resources provided by the state has anything to do with this, or are the structural reasons very different?
I think it's both. I mean, there's certainly a fear, and I'll echo what David was saying earlier. But like Ms. Gilmore said from the start, we're not in this just for the money. It's really about how we see our role in the community and the work that we do in the courtroom affecting outwards. And so, yes, we absolutely need resources. I don't want to be at all, dispositive about that. But it's a dual issue in terms of getting us the resources we need and also protecting the workers we have, because there's so much turnover. And as I mentioned just in my own office, the fact that half the people that I started with aren't around, That affects me as a young lawyer because I need to learn from folks who are older than me. And it affects our desire to stay and to be able to sustain ourselves in this kind of position. Thank you for the question, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Bidle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Cynthia, did you say that you do pay into the state retirement system?
Yes, Senator Bidle. It's a big chunk of our paycheck every time we get one.
If you're terminated and you haven't become vested, what happens? You just get the money returned, or how many years do you have to be in the system to be vested?
It requires 10 years of service to vest. If we are fired or terminated, I believe you can roll that money into something else. I might have to defer to Ms. Gilmore if she can give me assist on this.
But it is 10, up to 10 years that you've paid into something that you really don't see a benefit other than your, so is Ms. Gilmore still on?
Yeah.
Yes, she is.
Can you answer that for me, please, Denise?
Definitely, yeah. You have the right to certainly pull out the money. There's a penalty, but I think it's obviously to maximize the full benefit. It's to get your full years of service into the pension system, and that's just kind of the hard thing. You make this an investment early on, and then there's for whatever reason, right, you could be terminated and miss out on the opportunity to get that full benefit. It is unfair.
It is unfair. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, we're going next to Paul DeWolf, our Maryland Public Defender.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Paul DeWolf. I'm the State Public Defender. I've spent 31 of my 41 years as a lawyer with the Office of the Public Defender. I've been a line attorney for 10 years. I've been a district public for 10 years. And for the last 11 years, I have been the State Public Defender. I'm here to speak in opposition to this bill. But before I made that decision, I reached out to the leadership in the Public Defender's Office. We have 12 districts and 5 statewide divisions. And I can tell you that the leadership of all our divisions and all our districts, including our administrative districts, are united in opposition to Senate Bill 757. I can also report that recently our Board of Trustees, 13-member board, all attorneys, voted unanimously to oppose Senate Bill 757. My testimony is submitted, and the Board of Trustees statement is amended to that statement, so you can see it there. I won't go through my entire testimony, but I would ask you to read it, and I'll just highlight some of the points that we've made in the submission. In answer to Senator Benson's question, why are we opposed to Senate Bill 757? Why are the 561 attorneys in the Public Defender's Office special appointments? There's a reason why both the Public Defender's Office and the Attorney General's Office are organized this way. In essence, we are a law firm. The Public Defender's Office is the largest law firm in the state of Maryland, and the Attorney General's Office is the second largest. The merit system I apologize. The merit system was not created for a legal professional organization. I'd like to highlight some of the problems that this bill arises for the Office of the Public Defender. The first would be recruitment. We are able to recruit high-ranking law students prior to their graduation into their bar admission. Under the merit system operates as a point system, and it gives preferences to individuals with experience and with state with state employment. So a lot of our new recruits would be ineligible, or at least they would not be high ranking, and we would be required to pass over them with respect to the if we were in the merit system. Secondly, caseloads. Without the ability to make swift and nimble decisions, current employees will have to take on new cases. So when someone leaves, their cases don't go away. Those cases are given over to the remaining public defenders, and therefore their caseloads go up. And because of the hiring process, the appeals and protracted disciplinary action in the merit system, we lose our ability to hire employees to replace those that have left in a nimble and swift way. And that has obviously been a problem for our leadership. And that's why a lot of the leaders in the public defenders are opposed to this. They all have grown up in the public defender's office. Most of them have more than 20 years of service. They have been line attorneys before becoming supervisors, and they understand the nature of our culture and the nature of our ability to represent our clients. We have become, in the last several years, really one of the best public defender's office in the nation by reputation. Some of the other problems with the bill, I'll point out very briefly. The for cause language is not included in Title 11. It would make OPD employees unique among merit employees. This bill would not change that. Applying the change retroactively rather than the usual practice of phase-in, DBM has pointed out that is a problem. This is what they have said about the phase-in problem. They advise that typically current at-will employees, which include all current assistant public defenders, cannot be converted to professional service in the SPMS, the State Personnel Management System. If they were not hired in a merit-protected position through a competitive process specified in the statute, this is not clear. So it is not clear if OPD can reclassify positions held by existing employees. If not, those positions can only be reclassified when they become vacant. And that was pointed out by the Department of Budget and Management and included in the fiscal note that was submitted by the legislature. So all of our supervisors, our line supervisors, our deputy district public defenders would become, under this bill, merit system employees. And so most of our leadership would be absorbed into the merit system employee. And I don't think that was intended by the actions of the bill. So for all those reasons and for the other reasons that were indicated in our written testimony, we strongly oppose Senate Bill 757, and we ask for an unfavorable report. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer it.
I will say, Mr. DeWolf, that I have respected some work out of your office that I know about and have sought your advice regarding some legislation from time to time. But this presentation that you made sounds pretty much kind of Neanderthal. It doesn't sound like we in the 21st. Let me ask, if we were to bless this legislation with amendments, what would you need to have it done in the least disruptive manner as possible?
Senator Kelly, I appreciate the question. I would refer you to the fiscal note that we submitted, and it would require considerable additions to our HR department because basically we would have to build a whole labor relations force within our HR department. We don't have that. Most state agencies do have that, and we would have to build it in. I think the legislative fiscal note said that we would need 2 additional positions, but our HR department said that that would be significantly under resourcing us. We would need additional supervisors to supervise the attorneys under the merit system, and we would certainly need additional employees to our HR department in order to build a labor relations force within our HR department, which we just don't have that now.
Well, let me ask you this. Obviously, for the people that you keep, even short-term or intermediate term, you are having to make decisions from year to year as to who's meritorious enough that you can rely upon them to carry out the law and the objectives of the position, and to do so professionally and with integrity. So in a way, you are evaluating and you're making decisions from year to year, but with no sense of overall guidelines that everybody can buy into and know what the deal is. Wouldn't you say?
Well, in answer to your question, Senator Kelly, over the past 11 years, the one thing I have learned is that leadership makes a difference. And so our leadership in our 12 districts, many of which have been replaced over the course of that time, we have built a very strong leadership team, both in our divisions and our district. And they take hiring, and they take recruitment, and they take advancement and termination very seriously. So it's not done, it's done for consideration for the representation of our clients.
Did you say you have 561 attorneys under special appointment, and then that's yourself and the 12 district heads?
Yes.
Well, it sounds like you built a system, and of course you built one within the parameters of what Maryland invested you to work within, but it doesn't sound like the way a normal, even major law firm would work. Everybody would have some, do they get written copies of their evaluations each year?
Yes, Senator, our supervisors.
Do they have any input into what all the variables are that ought to be included as a part of the evaluations?
Absolutely, absolutely. All our employees are given PEP evaluations. They meet with their supervisors, and it's in writing, and they get a chance to respond like every state employee.
Well, do you have, other than those 12 district heads, some really highly functioning and very productive lawyers among the 561 attorneys due under special appointment, who year after year, so long as they stay until they get too despondent and decide to leave, some that you think deserve what normally they would get if they were in another law office environment?
Like the Attorney General's office, we represent clients, and most law firms are the same way. They are not under a merit system by any means. We're really proud of the 561 lawyers and the representation we provide to our 165,000 clients throughout.
They remain at will from year to year, never knowing if they really have a career or how to live their professional lives, do they?
Senator, like I said, all of our supervisors have come up through the system. I've been with the office for 31 years.
Okay.
People leave for all kinds of reasons, and our turnover rate is about 7%, which is significantly low for a state agency. So I think that people leave for all.
Let me ask this: if you had the fiscal resources to do differently, would you want to do anything different than what you have in terms of the way the personnel arrangement is working?
I think the merit system, as I said, is not really designed for a legal professional organization. It really is not, because we need to have the nimbleness to hire in an expedited manner. The merit system would give preference to, for example, if we had two applicants, one was a current law student about to graduate who has worked her career to the point where she wants to be nothing other than a public defender. She would score much lower than someone, say, from a state agency who's been around for 20 years, lived in Maryland for that period of time, has legal experience, but does not have the desire or the kinds of passion to become a public defender. I think our hiring system and our recruitment system is really state of the art with respect to getting the best people. We recruit nationally. We recruit from some of the best law schools, and we recruit from some of the local law schools. We have partnerships with both Maryland and UB Law School. We have an Innocence Project that.
Do you see yourself as running what is sort of an internship program for people who you expect to just go to other legal entities to make their careers?
Not at all, Senator Kelly. We have career public defenders. I'm a career public defender. There are so many.
So about how many of your, between the 13 of you, yourself, the 12 in the district divisions who had them, and the 561 attorneys that you have under special appointment, how many of you have made it a career of being in the public defender's office?
All of our leaders are career public defenders. We
But
have
that's a very minimal. Do you think that people who would live their whole career in the public defender's office, except for those few that rise to the positions of leadership that you have, or somehow tend to be inferior in terms of their productivity or their technical expertise or their commitment to the job, or what?
Not at all, Senator Kelly. We have an excellent training program. We have a career development program. We have a leadership development program. We want our attorneys to be career public defenders. We hire them, and that's why we're able to hire from some of the best law schools. We recruit people that have a passion for public defense, would love to spend their career as public defenders, as we've heard from some of our employees today. And so I would not say at all that we're an intern program or that people come to the public defender's office to learn some skills and to move on to private practice. It used to be that way. It's not that way now. We encourage, we have a juvenile division where people can come here wanting to be juvenile public defenders for life. We're one of the few public defender agencies in the country that encourage juvenile career development. Most public defender's office use it as a stepping stone to get to felony work or to get to district.
It sounds like for maybe most of the other subdisciplinary areas, you are seen by your public defenders as just a stepping stone or a step between a stone or something.
Not at all. We have an appellate division that is filled with career public defenders. We have a post-conviction division that is filled with career public defenders. As I said, okay. Our juvenile division, we have specialized juvenile training. We have specialized post-conviction training so that people can come to the public defender's office and spend their career representing our clients.
Yeah, I've met some really impressive people who worked for you, and I don't know how many of them are there now. Well, let me ask you, do the people who testified today have to fear anything because they testified in favor of this bill?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Okay, are there other questions for Maryland State Public Defender. Okay, thank you.
Senator Kelly, if I may, I just wanted to provide two clarifying points on the previous testimony, if possible.
You know what? I wish I could. Can you send them to me by email or something? Because I do need to move on. I've got other people that are waiting, and I know the time is inadequate. Thanks so much. Okay, that ends the testimony on that bill. We're going now to Senate Bill 708, Vice Chair Senator Feldman, and cannabis legalization and regulation. You got to unmute, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just by way of a little background, you know, the bill in front of you is lengthy. And as a result, I have provided the committee with a summary document you should have received this afternoon that I think walks the committee through some of the highlights of the bill with page numbers and such. And I think that could be, you know, instructive. The other thing I do want to thank Senate President Ferguson, Chair Gazzoni, as well as Chair Will Smith. All three have co-sponsored this particular piece of legislation. Now, I want to go step back a little bit for the committee. So back in 2013, obviously, if you recall, for those of you who were here in the legislature at the time, there was a lot of resistance to the passage and the creation of our medical cannabis program. And, you know, over time, obviously, public opinion has shifted around the country, and I'd say pretty dramatically. So right now, today, we were one of the first states out in 2013. Today, there are 33 states that have cannabis, medical cannabis programs in the United States. And quite honestly, the most recent state's Mississippi, not exactly a deep blue America. So that has shifted. And a couple of years ago, this committee, the Finance Committee, got jurisdiction over the medical cannabis program. And we've taken some action. You know, if you recall, just last year, we passed the Connors Courage Law that let kids with severe health issues get access to medical cannabis in the schools. At the time, even just a year ago, that was even controversial. But during the course of the session, opinions evolved. We passed it unanimously out of the committee. This year, we have a bill dealing with workers' compensation, workers' comp involving reimbursement for medical cannabis. Again, we're moving forward on the medical cannabis space. As for moving now to the topic of adult use, legalization, regulation, taxation, which is what Senate Bill 708 calls for, I would suggest that just like we saw with medical cannabis, opinions are evolving and changing dramatically and very quickly. Right now, as we sit here, Madam Chair, members of the committee, there are now 15 states in the United States have gone full-blown adult use legalization, plus the District of Columbia, essentially. So the landscape is shifting quickly and dramatically. Just in November, we had 4 states, South Dakota, Montana, not exactly, these are deep red states, along with New Jersey and Arizona, passed ballot initiatives to move towards adult use legalization. And just within the last week, Madam Chair, in our own neighborhood, Commonwealth of Virginia, right across the river from my Senate district, came together, the House and Senate, to pass legislation that's moving Virginia towards adult use legalization. It's sitting on Governor Northam's desk as we speak. And what about the polling? Polling's pretty dramatic too. So in Virginia, right over the river, they did some polling as this was being debated this session, and while we've been here actually, and here's what the polling in Virginia showed, that 68% of registered voters in Virginia supported full-blown legalization. What about here in Maryland? One of the documents that I've submitted to the committee today is a poll done the end of January and February of 2021. Where does Maryland come down right now? And if you want to pull it up, you can pull it up. But here's what the numbers in Maryland show for support of legalization, taxation of the sale of adult use cannabis. 80% Democrats support, 14 opposed. Republicans, and that's for my three colleagues on the other side of the aisle, 64% support, 30 opposed. And overall, in the state of Maryland, under this poll that I've submitted to the committee today, 75% of the citizens of the state support full-blown adult use legalization, with only 20% completely opposed. That's the state of Maryland. That's where we are right now. In the meantime, the United States Congress is moving. If you recall, in November, the US House passed, admittedly a pretty symbolic, had a vote to remove marijuana from the federal schedule of controlled substances and to provide for regulation taxation of legal cannabis. Obviously, with the change in the United States Senate, I think we're on the cusp of a lot of changes at the federal level. And what about budget? Now, we as a state need money, as is the case with all 50 states. And this would bring in revenue. Currently, all this money is being, the illicit market is robust in this region and in our state, and the product is not being taxed. This brings it into the fold under this legislation, and we would probably expect something to the tune of $300 million in new sales and new revenue from moving in this direction. I'm going to commend Delegate Jazz Lewis, who has a piece of legislation, House Bill 32, on the House side. And his bill and this bill are very, very similar. I would say 90–95% of a lot of overlap. And quite frankly, one of the witnesses that I've designated today helped Delegate Lewis draft his piece of legislation. He had a hearing and he has already amended his bill to make it look a bit more like this bill. And by the same token, I'm working on a package of amendments myself to get this bill a little closer to Delegate Lewis's bill, taking into account, I think, the feedback that I hope to get from a lot of stakeholders. But I decided to hold off submitting all those amendments because I wanted to get a little feedback from this committee, Madam Chair, in all candor. But if there's interest in moving a bill this year, I'm prepared to work with Delegate Lewis and with this committee and offer a pretty substantial set of amendments, again, to make it happen. And that's kind of where that is. As you can see, if you look at the summary document, which I mentioned is going through some provisions. Let me just, and really the goal there with this bill is to try to borrow from the best practices of the other 15 states that already have laws in place. And we're talking about making a legal product for Marylanders 21 and older. It's not for minors, we're talking about adult use, that in all candor has resulted in disproportionate rate of arrest and incarceration, while also we're trying to achieve here with this bill economic opportunities in a more diverse cannabis industry, and again generate sales and revenues to help communities most impacted by prior cannabis enforcement, mass incarceration, while also generating money to help our state fund a lot of its priorities. So that's all what we're trying to achieve here. Now, on the criminal justice part of the bill, there's a lot there. We've got provisions dealing with expungements, higher legal possession thresholds, dismissal of current charges, and other provisions. Very, very similar to Delegate Lewis's bill, I would say. As far as the social equity provisions of the bill, I would say to you that I think both the House Bill 32 and this bill, if passed, would provide the strongest set of social equity programs of any state in the nation, including the 15 that are already in law. And what we've done is, and we've attacked this in a lot of different ways. So one thing, and you'll see in the summary and in the bill, we have a social equity startup fund. We're creating a cannabis education training fund, and then a community reinvestment and repair fund. The first one, the social equity startup fund, is funded by the current medical licensees. If they want to get into the adult use space, they're going to have to pay significant fees into that fund, and that fund will be used for low interest loans and other kinds of things, for working capital, for social equity applicants trying to get into this space. And the other funds that I described would be taken from a portion of the revenue generated by these new legal sales. So those are some of the big picture items. And again, when we talk about community reinvestment, we're talking about back into the communities most impacted by the enforcement mechanisms and mass incarcerations and all the rest. So we're talking, again, a lot of stuff. It's in the bill. We're talking reentry programs, scholarship assistance, money for HBCUs, housing assistance, home ownership, small business loan, community-based organizations, workforce development. That's all in this bill. And also on the social equity side, we're giving social equity applicants a first shot at certain types of cannabis licenses. For example, we're creating some like transportation licenses, delivery license, no big barriers to entry, and other things that I think some of the witnesses can talk about. We want to make sure we do this in a constitutional way. We want to avoid what happened, I think, with the medical program. We don't want to create a program that has lawsuits flying in the next day. So we want to do it there. A second, I'm just going to outline two other primary goals here, Madam Chair, if you can indulge me. We have a very robust medical cannabis program. We have tens of thousands of Marylanders who are using that program. So when you transition to adult use, you've got to do it in a way to make sure that the folks who are relying on their medical cannabis still have a medical cannabis industry to get their meds from. So you have to be, I think, careful to do that balance. We want to keep the medical program robust. We don't want to tax it. We want to keep it untaxed. But again, you have to do it in a way also to make sure there's room in the market for the new social equity applicants that we're trying to make room for. And finally, Madam Chair, in terms of goals, the regulatory structure is very, very important. And there is an amendment that, one of the amendments I'm going to put in, we have to house the medical program and the adult use under one house. In the way I think there's consensus between the House and Senate on this one now. I think it needs to be, again, for a multitude of reasons. First of all, our current medical cannabis folks and our executive director, Will Tilburg, will testify shortly. They have a lot of institutional knowledge. Also, and we don't want to start over there. We want to protect the medical market, but we're going to have people in the medical market also now in the adult use market. You don't want to have two regulators. You want to have one, and a bunch of other reasons that I think Will can talk to. But it would be housed not in the current commission. We are moving to, I think, a different model. Our newly created Alcohol Tobacco Commission would now be the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Cannabis Commission, with a division in there that has Mr. Tilburg and some of his folks. But it's under a new regulatory body, and I think that is a good idea, but it really needs to be under one house and one roof. And then again, finally, Madam Chair, the final parts of the bill provide a number of provisions and protections, non-discrimination provisions that are very important. So you'll see in the bill various protections and provisions related to parental rights, child custody. You can't be denied child custody because you've been tested positive for cannabis use. Employer protections, employee protections, property owner protections, landlord protections, professional license. You shouldn't be denied the ability to get we just said, Mr. DeWolf, a law license or a medical license because you've tested positive. We have to have those protections in place. This bill does it. For my friends who are big Second Amendment folks, we have provisions here that specifically say you can't be denied your firearms if you happen to be testing positive. We want protections for everybody here. And it also makes some tax changes. Right now in Maryland, unlike every other legal business, you cannot deduct your normal business expenses. This bill addresses it, so-called 280E issue that relates to federal law. But under this bill, you'll be able to deduct your business expenses in your legal cannabis business, just like every other legal business in the state of Maryland. And we have some tax rates. I think the House and Senate tax rate structure has come close. I think that's resolvable. And people ask about, this does not, let me say, finally, does not give a green light to anybody to drive or be impaired or drive under the influence. And we can talk a little bit about that. There's still penalties for smoking in public. It doesn't impact a private employer's workplace in terms of testing policies or a property owner or landlord's rules or policies governing consumption in an apartment or, again, in the workplace. Doesn't impact any of that stuff. So I know it's a big bill. I would say Virginia acted with this session quick. The national landscape is shifting, and with that, if there is a will to move a bill this session, Madam Chair. I commit to working with Delegate Lewis. The differences now are actually very narrow, and I'm pretty confident we can come up with one bill, but the starting point is this committee. So Madam Chair, I'm going to stop there. I know there's questions. We do have, I will say, some experts behind me who have worked this issue around the country. They may be better able to answer some of the questions, but I'll certainly take a crack at it if I can.
Okay, let me start with one question and then we'll see who else has questions. Whereas right now with just the medical cannabis in Maryland, we've got a few outlets, relatively speaking, to and few places where it's grown and where it's sold. And one unmet need is for banking because of federal law.
Right.
If we really permeate the whole state and this gets to be broad-based like alcohol outlets are, we're going to have a real mess, don't you think, unless we can get the feds to do something about.
Well, Madam Chair, you're absolutely right. Look, on the banking, first of all, you're absolutely right. The feds, and I do think with the United States Senate now changing hands, there's great hope very soon this year that you're going to see a move in the United States Congress to loosen everything up on that. But don't forget, that already applies to the medical program we currently have right now.
But that's so small comparatively. I mean, if you really
well, okay, but I will say we now have 15 states that manage to be doing this, and they're finding ways to do commerce, notwithstanding the challenges of our. So we have 33 states in the nation with medical cannabis programs, 15 states with adult use legalization. So yes, the United States Senate, the United States Congress could help out a lot with some changes. I think the changes are coming soon. Otherwise, truthfully, Madam Chair, with Virginia, DC, I should note Pennsylvania has a new bill. And New Jersey was another state that on November 3rd passed an initiative. We're gonna be here on an island, all the money's gonna be generated in our neighbors. And I do think this is a discussion we need to have. Otherwise, we'll be sitting surrounded by folks states making hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And finally, Madam Chair, we already have an illicit market. This is a question of just, it's being done now. We just might as well tax and regulate and get the money and use it for all the good stuff our state could use it for.
One last question. I remember maybe about 10 years ago attending an NCSL session on cannabis. And what is that residual TH something that
THC
know how to test for to determine if you are really comparable to drunk or if you're not? And what would they do about that?
Well, and we have some folks behind me can answer that even better than me. The technology is evolving quickly. You're right, it's not, and it stays in your system for a while. So even if you tested positive, that doesn't necessarily mean, that was like today. So you could test positive today, it might be that you used, but we have that right. We have that issue right now with the medical. We have, again, tens of thousands in Maryland right now are utilizing medical cannabis and they're going to work, they're driving. So that is a challenge. I think the technology is evolving quickly. Impairment, there are techniques now that didn't exist even a few years ago for sobriety tests and roadside, not just alcohol. People are impaired taking, too much other kinds of stuff too, not just alcohol. So I think that is a legit issue. Some of the witnesses could speak to it, but we have that problem right now.
Okay. Are there other questions of our sponsor?
There's some questions, Madam Chair.
All right, Senator Hayes, and then following him, Senator Benson and Senator Kramer.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, for presenting this bill. Mr. Vice Chair, as you know, this summer, a group of us from the Legislative Black Caucus had an informal group where we've been meeting for months around potential legislation like this, and I see that there are some similarities. I guess where my concern kind of lie is some of the things that's similar. There's lower thresholds around like new minority-owned businesses and less funding for like the social equity startups as well as HBCUs and community reinvestment. And so I know you and Delegate Lewis are working together on this, but would you consider those to be some of the things that you guys are continue to work on and improve?
Yeah, well, so, just structurally, we both have the same funds that you're talking about, community reinvestment, the startup fund, the same funds are there. And it's a question of how much money do you hit the
That's my point.
licensees with, the current ones. So these aren't, I mean, that's not those are in both bills, and that this committee, if there's interest in moving a bill, we can set it however we want to set it. So I don't see that as an obstacle, a significant obstacle at all. The bills are structurally very, very similar. And it's a question
they are.
how much, the startup, if you're a medical licensee and you want to get it and get another license adult use, both bills are hitting those folks up with significant fees. The question is, I don't know where the thread the needle to get, the kind of money. If it's too much, then they won't participate and you don't get the money. So there's probably a good answer. I think that's eminently resolvable. I don't see that as a big obstacle to the bills coming together.
Got you. No, and I appreciate that. I think the other issue is around these micro growers, as far as an opportunity to have more diversity in the market. Like the chair adequately pointed out, there's such a small group of individuals that's running things. I know the president of the chair of the Black Caucus have spoke about uncapping that to provide for some more small time businesses or whatever. But I wonder, how does this bill address that? And has there been any consideration to provide for more?
Well, two things. I think both bills envision that we have a category of license where I think it's transport, delivery, and even if you do get my summary document, you'll see the social equity applicants get an exclusive period to apply for some of the new licenses before it's even open to everybody else. And, if you look at that document, I think you'll see that it's, specifically, I have the times here, but that aside, so there is an effort there. On the issue of the micro grow licenses, what I think you're talking about, because I'll make the point again.
Yeah.
It's really, really important, I think, to create licenses that don't have major economic barriers to entry. The big grows, like you need tens of millions. So the reason the license I just described makes sense is because of that. Same thing, I think Delegate Lewis, and I say Karen O'Keefe, who I think helped Delegate Lewis work, will be testifying, so you can actually ask her directly. But the issue as it's been framed has been, if you don't have any limitation, might you run the risk of having too much supply come into the market? And that has a tendency to drive down prices, in which case maybe everybody fails. Like, you don't want to see all these new licenses, but the prices go down to supply. And some have said that in Oregon, for example, that was a problem. I think Miss O'Keefe has a different take on that issue, but I think that the micro license idea, I think, is a great idea, because it's low barriers to entry. A lot of folks can get in it, but you don't necessarily want to just, if you open up and have like 100,000 new licenses, do you then run the risk of too much product and glut bringing down prices? But you can maybe ask some of the other witnesses. So that has been an issue. I even would say that issue seems resolvable. I see compromise there as well. But again, philosophically, bills are aligned. It's the question, you have no cap, or do you make sure there's enough demand in the marketplace before you increase up? You start and do it more methodically, as opposed to no caps from the start. But, that's a legitimate issue. Yeah.
Right. Indeed. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Benson?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, you're on. You remuted yourself. Unmute yourself. Okay. Now you've done it again. Yes, you're Unmute. Yeah, now leave it alone. Oh, you just remuted it. We can't hear you. Now, yeah, you're fat. No, when you do it once, leave it alone. We can't hear you. Okay, now leave it alone. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. You know that this whole issue of the medical cannabis had its start with the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus. That's where it was born. But the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus, if I may tell you, feels that we were left with crumbs on the table. That's the feeling. Now, we're not going to go through that again with this bill here, because right now, many of us are not feeling, we're not feeling good about passing this bill. We're just not feeling good about it because we felt that we got a little stung with this last bill that dealt with medical cannabis. So my question now is, can you specifically tell me, Mr. Vice Chair,
Yes.
has been the compromise with Senator Jazz Lewis's bill? I mean, with Delegate Jazz Lewis's bill. What has been the compromise? What have we talked? Because I'm telling you, we're going to be very careful with this bill. Very, very careful.
I understand.
That the bill warrants our support at this point in time because of what happened with the last bill and what we're seeing with the contents of this bill.
Well, okay, I'm going to just reiterate a couple of things. Number one, both bills, I think, have the strongest social equity program concepts in the country if we pass it. And I'm committed to doing that. I think that's, the bill has a variety, a startup fund, as I say, a community reinvestment fund. It has all that. As far as how much money we put into that, you know, the legislative process is such. I mean, I think if there's interest in actually doing a bill from this committee, I think we can absolutely come to a compromise. You know, one of the reasons I'm doing the hearing today, I'm trying to get a little feedback from the committee. Is there interest in moving forward? And if so, you task me with negotiating the final, issues with Jazz. I'm prepared to do it, but I need to know from my own committee that there's at least 6 or 7 of you who want to move in that direction. And that's kind of what, I think part of the goal here is today. So okay. I think that I hear you. Look, I was the chair of the conference committee on HB2 in 2018. I absolutely am well aware of, the history and what we tried to achieve in that bill. And I chaired the conference committee to create new licenses in that legislation for minority, I would say for licensees that would address some of the litigation and all the issues. So I have history with that very topic, Senator Benson, and I don't want us to go down that road and make that mistake again. I mean, I was in the middle of that just 3 years ago.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, Senator Kramer.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Feldman, I'll be honest with you, I have not so much as even looked at the bill yet. It will be getting some very close scrutiny, I assure you. Glad to hear that the concept of moving the regulatory authority into the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission is in fact the direction this is going. And when discussion of first creating the committee began with the presiding officers at the time in the House and Senate, it was conceptualized that marijuana would also become part of what the commission would regulate. Although I have to say the idea of alcohol and tobacco and cannabis, as opposed to ATM, alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana, is a little disappointing, but that's something else entirely different. But I'll want to have a good understanding of how that structure will be put in place to fit it in with alcohol and tobacco.
Can I just ask you to answer that one real quick?
Sure.
We've got Will Tilburg coming testifying. He is our executive director, and he's talked to the folks at the new commission. And I think he has a good sense of how this would work. It'd probably be a separate division. We take our expertise from the current commission. I think there's some, and so that if you want to just, I think he'll be able to directly answer that question, Senator Kramer.
And that, thank you. No, and I appreciate that. I'm just putting it out there as one of those things that I think, it's going to have to be fleshed out. Also very important to me, and I don't know how the bill addresses it, the issue of secondhand smoke. I have worked on this issue for years with regard to tobacco, and all of our residents who live in multi-dwelling units that are exposed to secondhand tobacco smoke and find it extremely problematic. We've got lots of little things that may or may not happen at the local level. Some of it is governed by the state level with regard to exposure to secondhand smoke. But I guarantee the moment people start lighting up en masse in multi-unit dwellings, this issue of secondhand exposure is going to rear its ugly head and be something that hopefully we've put the parts in place to allow redress for those who don't want to be exposed to the secondhand smoke. So I think that's something that we have to look very carefully at the front end, not at.
On that issue, I love two things. First of all, the bill specifically calls that public consumption is subject to fine. That is not allowed under the bill.
That's not the issue, though.
Well, let me just say on the multi-dwelling. So look, if it's a problem under this bill, the landlord, whoever the property owner, has 100% authority. Nothing in this bill precludes them having a no smoking policy within the complex. So that bill specifically gives landlords, property owners protection on that front. So, like any other problem the property owner landlord has, this doesn't impact their ability.
And with all due respect, it's not the landlords I'm worried about. It's the residents, the occupants, the tenant.
Sure.
And they're the ones that are experiencing the problem now. It's not a landlord issue, it's a tenant issue.
And and the only thing I'd say is it's happening now. The illicit, people are just doing it illegally. So it would be nice if this is somehow creating a situation that's not already happening. It's just we're not taxing it. That's really, to me, how I look at that issue. I think it's a totally legit issue if it weren't happening in the multi-dwelling units currently, but it is.
And to a very limited degree, I agree with you, but that can't be the fallback position in legalizing recreational marijuana, that we might as well just do it because it's happening everywhere right now, because it's not the circumstance. We are going to be increasing usage with passage of this bill. And I think we need to be prepared to do more than just simply say, hey, it's already happening, so let's move on and not focus on concerns about these issues. Finally, and I'll say the same thing, it's not about it's happening now, impaired driving. And, it took me 7 years of hard work to get Noah's Law passed. And here we are bringing in an entirely different but similar issue to impaired driving. And, look, I haven't followed it closely. I know 1 and 2 years after the fact, I was still seeing a lot in the news in Colorado about significantly increased problems with impaired driving. And these are all things that I think need to be addressed, and we can't shrug our shoulders and say it's happening now.
Look,
so
I
I just
agree.
want to put it out there, and I'm done. And
No, I listen. Those are all very, very valid, solid points, and I'm not dismissive of any of them. They're all legit issues, and they came up with the medical program, Sarah Kramer.
I understand.
You just mentioned, happened 7 years ago when people were like, no, what are you kidding me? Medical marijuana, you're going to just make it legal and people are going to go in there. I'm just making that point. That's a 7-year debate that we had in 2013.
No, and I understand, but we're taking things, as the chair pointed out, we're going to a much higher scale now. This is scaling up to a much higher degree. Medical marijuana, it was the first step. And of course, at the time, everybody said, that's the camel's nose under the tent. We're going to go right into recreational marijuana, and that may be fine. But I don't want to short shift these issues that are so important to every one of our residents, not just those who want to be able to get the product, but those who are going to be affected by everyone who is using the product.
I hear you. Those are all valid points. Totally valid.
Okay, guys, we do have 10 additional witnesses, and Senator Augustine has a question for the current witness.
Madam Chair, and I'll try to be brief. I do need to echo what Senator Kramer said. I've got lots of, this is one of the big complaints that I have. It's actually between townhomes. I live in a place that has got some density, and the neighbors just feel like it is medical marijuana. They feel like they're stuck in their home. They don't know what to do. I get a lot of those complaints actually about their inability to escape secondhand smoke. I also have Vice Chair Feldman, significant number of federal employees or people who are subject to background checks. I know there's been some relaxation on that, but I'm very concerned about that and the secondhand smoke that Senator Kramer was talking about in that regard. But then my real question for you though is, we do have Colorado to look at, and I am very concerned about the public health impact. I mean, we're talking about in this committee trying to reduce the number of inhalants that our children and that our people are doing for health reasons. Do you have, or do we have some longitudinal data? Some of what I see suggests that it's not very positive from a public health standpoint. Do you have that longitudinal data around the public health impact that is occurring in places that have had?
Yeah, I mean, Senator Augustine's great question. I know that there's some panelists behind me that are a little more expert. I'm not.
Okay.
And
I also, you asked for input, Vice Chair.
Well, I'm just, I'm not a scientist. See, I think what you're going to find is a lot of conflicting science on this subject, from Colorado to now to the 15 states to the medical program. I mean, like this again is not a new issue, right? But it's totally legit. And let me just say this, Madam Chair, we can go to the next witness. I really want to say, I wanted to get a little feedback from the committee here. I mean, Delegate Lewis had his hearing already, and it's important. I didn't have a good take of where the committee is and where the committee's concerns are. And, that's important to the process here. So this is actually, I think this is good, Madam Chair, for me and for the body, to flush this out. Because I say, right across the river from my Senate district, they just moved this week. So, and DC has a new bill yesterday introduced. So, we can raise the issues. I'm just telling you what the landscape in the neighborhood's looking like, and we need to have at least a discussion about this. So, Madam Chair, I'll stop there. I know we've got some other witnesses, and those are all great questions for my colleagues.
Thank you. The 5-minute witness is Daniel Smith from BS Strategies.
Hey, Madam Chair, committee members, thank you so much for providing me the opportunity to testify before you today. I'm here in support of SB 708 with amendment. As you just mentioned, my name is Dan Smith and I work at VS Strategies. That's a cannabis policy and public affairs firm. I specialize mostly in state cannabis policy. I'm sure you're familiar with many of the compelling reasons to end cannabis prohibition generally. So I'm going to focus today on what I think makes this bill a great framework for adult use legalization in Maryland, and will echo some of the points that Senator Feldman just made. Specifically, this bill kind of structures itself around achieving two main goals that we've been talking about so far. The first one being providing support for individuals and communities that were disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. And second, trying to displace the illicit cannabis market quickly by making safe, tested, high quality products available to consumers at a competitive price. The social equity provisions in the bill are numerous, and as has been mentioned a few times, they're pretty similar in form and structure to the bill filed by Delegate Lewis. And to echo Senator Feldman's comments, I do think that if this were to pass, this would be the most robust social equity bill that's been enacted so far. It will generate significant revenue to set up the no interest loan fund that has been talked about before. It will also generate significant impact to reinvest in communities that have been disproportionately impacted. This lack of funding has been something that we've seen hold back programs in other states, particularly Massachusetts, where there wasn't the same sort of structure set up to set up a loan fund and to reinvest in communities that have been hurt. Probably the next big thing is it creates a licensing structure that I'll talk a little bit more about in a second, but that will ensure that many social equity applicants will be able to start their own business, and it tries to fix some of the issues that we saw in the licensing process in a state like Illinois. And finally, as mentioned, again, it implements the necessary criminal justice reforms on possession limits and things like automatic expungement. So probably the most important part of the bill, and kind of the part that we're talking about in the compromise, is dealing with how the licensing structure will work. The licensing structure in this bill is designed to further both of these main goals. The illicit market is going to continue to thrive until the legal market is able to compete on access, quality, and price. The existing businesses, the existing medical businesses, are the entities that are in position right now to start pulling those customers out of the illicit market and into the taxed regulated market, and to start generating that revenue. But in order to be licensed for adult use sales, these operators would be charged substantial fees that will probably raise tens of millions of dollars for that loan fund to try to help support social equity applicants entering the market. That tax revenue that they'll start to generate also goes to support social equity applicants through some of that money goes back to that loan fund. Some of it will go for technical assistance, things like that. And there's also quite a bit that will be reinvested into disproportionately impacted communities. But probably most importantly, and the part that we've been talking about a lot today, is at the same time that these sales are beginning, the commission will start issuing a series of licenses, all of which are likely to go to social equity applicants. The number of cultivators will more than double, and all those new licenses will be reserved for social equity applicants. This is the kind of the supply issue that was hinted at before. What we're trying to do is make sure that we created a sufficient supply based on a market analysis done for the medical commission. So that's where we think it's a sufficient amount of cultivators to start. There's also a series of licenses, delivery licenses, transporter licenses, processor licenses that will all be reserved for social equity applicants at the start. These are lower barrier to entry licenses. They require less capital to start up, so should allow more folks to get into the market. And finally, there's also going to be a number of new retail licenses, 47 new retail licenses that will be spread around the state by Senate district in order to both provide more access to the industry for people looking for licenses, but also provide more access to customers to try to pull them in out of the black market. That process is actually going to be based on a scored application process, but 20% of the points will be reserved for social equity applicants. One last big piece I want to touch on is just the tax structure here.
You're almost out of time. You've got about 15 or 20 seconds.
All right, I'll go quick then. The tax structure in this bill is phased in, so it increases over time. We see in other states that the price generally falls over time. So we tried to create a tax structure that would keep prices low at the start to pull in people from the illicit market. And then as the prices fall, the tax rate increases to kind of keep revenue growing and keep the price stable as it goes. So thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions. There's a lot of important provisions in this bill that would take much longer than I had today to run through them all, but so happy to answer questions and see.
Do we have questions for Mr. Smith? Okay, thank you. We're going next to Joe Bryce from Manus Canning and Associates.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Joe Bryce with Manus Canning and Associates. I represent the Maryland Wholesale Medical Cannabis Trade Association, which is comprised of the majority of current medical grower and processor licensees. This is the first time we are testifying on an adult use bill. We are not an organization that was founded as an adult use organization. Our experience is in the medical market, but as though Senator Feldman said, other states are moving. Virginia will allow sales now in 2024. New Jersey had the ballot initiative and then the legislation. So from our perspective, I think we have some experience in the structure of the medical market and as well-regulated entities that have provided a safe product over the last 5 or 6 years. We do believe there's a role for us in this new market, while also space for many, many more. Really quickly, Senator Feldman touched on the regulator and the regulations. I think Senator Kramer's point, they need to be independent wherever they are. Right now, they get stuck behind the Department of Health bureaucracy whenever they really need to move quickly. You need to keep relying on their expertise, and there needs to be one body. Related, there's multiple regulations. Many of the things you see listed in the bill that the regulator should do are already encompassed in the medical cannabis regulations. And unless there is some compelling reason, we shouldn't start from scratch and we should work off of those regulations. Taxation, I think the phase-in is a good idea. Maintaining the lack of a tax on the medical products are a good idea. Taxing it at the point of sale. And keeping not allowing the keeping of separate inventory systems. Senator Feldman pointed out the 280E issue, which is a major issue for dispensaries, processors, growers who cannot write off a significant amount of their business expenses and end up getting taxed at a 70 to 90% rate. As Senator Benson, Senator Hayes pointed out, we cannot repeat the start of the medical market when we embark on this new market. Like Senator Feldman, I worked on House Bill 2, supported House Bill 2, and I think the recent actions of the commission, which awarded 11 new licenses, 9 of which were to majority African American owned firms, has demonstrated a more committed body to making sure that those equity and inclusion goals are met. It's a complicated issue, as you heard from Senator Feldman. There's probably 5 JPR issues and 3 B&T issues and a whole bunch of issues for finance to sort out. For us, there's a robust medical cannabis market here. I think not every state has a market of this size. We have producers at various levels of growth. As I mentioned, new minority-owned businesses that haven't opened their doors yet. And we need to figure out a Maryland solution to this Maryland issue. I'm probably running out of time, but I think there are a few lessons that we learned from the medical program. Most pronounced, diversity and inclusion, which needs to be at the front of everybody's minds. I think as you look at this bill, also, there are some dates and deadlines built into this bill that we saw in the medical program, created some expectations that really weren't realistic and led to a lot of unnecessary angst. It won't affect our licensees as much as it will the new ones that you create, but I think it is worth thinking through those issues. And the last thing I would encourage is you have to look at all these things together, because the size of facilities, the number of facilities, the location of facilities, all of these things kind of work together to help lead you to where you should end up. And Senator Hayes, to your point, there are a lot of things that go into how many
you're
licenses.
running out of time.
Yes, Senator. There's just a lot of things that go into licensing numbers and things of that nature. There's local government has the ability under this bill to not allow facilities to locate in their jurisdiction. You have all kinds of considerations that I think we will work through and need to be worked through. And as Senator Feldman said, I think there's a lot more in common in these bills than there are different. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. We have Senator Bidle, followed by Senator Klossmeyer with some questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bryce, for your testimony. You brought up the medical marijuana. And one of my questions is, what happens to all of these medical marijuana places that have really fought hard to get their licenses and have dispensaries? What happens when the guy down the street's just selling, recreational marijuana?
So Senator Bidle, there's a few provisions in this bill that Senator Feldman referenced. One is the bill would allow those licensees to enter the market after paying a fee into a social equity fund that would help new social equity applicants assist in putting together applications, getting startup capital. So you would pay into the system to help new licensees come in, and you would be able to participate in both the medical and the recreational program at that point. As I said, we have a relatively big medical program, and so figuring out how to merge the programs and yet provide significant economic opportunities for new licensees is important. As I said, it's complicated by the fact that we have current licensees who are at multiple stages of development, including not being off the ground yet. And so there's going to be a lag time to all this. I think allowing the early entry into the market allows the state to generate revenue more quickly, which goes into all these funds in addition to the social equity fund. So I do think it's a balance, but there are a lot of people who have invested a lot of money, spent a lot of time, and worked hard to make this program successful. And they've proven that they can grow safe, reliable product and should definitely be a part of this, as I believe they are in every other state.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator Klossmeyer.
Yeah, I just want to follow up with that question, that when the medical cannabis opened up in my district, it was a big hullabaloo, and a lot of the neighbors said, we know what's going to happen next, it'll be recreational. And I don't know who the vendor is there, but it was promised to them that there would not be recreational there. So it's just something to keep in mind. And it just kind of, it's a little worry to me that it was promised to them, and them is, I don't know, it could have been a handful of neighbors. So just a thought.
Thank you.
Okay, let me just let you know something. Because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 more people. Do you want to let them go ahead and talk, and then we could come back and you figure who among those that you keep a record have heard from, because you might get some of the answers in people's constructive remarks. Is that okay? All right, and if we can try that, then let's go next with Hope Wiseman.
All right. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Hope Wiseman, and I'm the founder and CEO of Marion, Maine, one of the few independently owned and Black-owned cannabis businesses in the state of Maryland. I'm here today representing the Maryland Medical Dispensary Association. We are here in support of Senate Bill 708 with amendments on the following topics: the tax rate, the local authority, the regulatory body, low-tier cultivation licenses for unaffiliated dispensaries, ownership caps, and the geographic spread of dispensaries. We request that the language around the tax rate be clarified to either be an excise tax or a sales tax. Also, we recommend that the tax rate remains flat and does not increase over time. Next, we believe that including local authority in the licensing process may in fact slow down the licensing process, which none of us want. Then we have no preference around which regulatory body should be chosen to oversee the adult use program. However, we do recommend that the same body regulate both programs and that we adopt the medical programs regulations where appropriate. Next, we do support the addition of low-tier cultivation licenses. As we know from the lack of supply to unaffiliated dispensaries like mine in the medical program, these licenses will create product stability, price stability, and will help to ensure a more equitable distribution of flower across the market. Because in the current medical market, most dispensaries that are unaffiliated with a grower are unable to source enough flower to meet current demand. So we expect that to happen in the adult use market as well. Next, the bill as written legislates how the application must appear for retailers only, but no other kinds of licenses. So we would want to see it legislate all of the application processes that would happen. And then lastly, as far as ownership caps go, we request that the 4 license cap that exists in the medical program be adopted by the adult use program as well. And that we believe the geographic spread of dispensaries is very important, but 47 is a reasonable number to meet that demand. So for these reasons, MDA requests a favorable report on Senate Bill 708 with amendments.
Okay, thank you. We're going to
No
go
problem,
through,
Madam Chair.
and then we'll come back if you guys can all wait for any questions. William
problem.
Till is next.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Will Tilburg here on behalf of the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission. I'd like to start by thanking Senator Feldman and Delegate Lewis for working with stakeholders to try and identify a consensus approach to what's a complex and important bill that seeks to address a complex and important series of issues. As we've heard Senator Feldman and others talk about, this bill has criminal justice reform, social equity, community reinvestment, grants and loans for small businesses on top of coming out of a commercial legalized adult use market surrounding cannabis, which is a drug, an agricultural crop, a food product, and a dietary supplement, which also happens to still be federally illegal. And since it's federally illegal, there remain no national standards for testing, product manufacture, et cetera. So it's complex. Given those complexities at the commission, we've reached out to our regulator colleagues around the country to identify challenges they faced, lessons they learned, best practices they adopted from the transition to medical only to adult use in medical. Chief, among the lessons learned that they've shared with us was discussed by the senator among his amendments, which is not to separately regulate medical and adult use programs, but to merge them under one regulator. Today, there are 15 states that have legalized adult use. All of them have combined programs. That was not always the case. Several states did have separately regulated programs, and they encountered significant issues, namely a doubling of administrative costs. If you have 2 agencies doing substantively identical work, you're doubling the cost to the state to perform those duties. Second, a burden on businesses. We talk about how medical licensees are able to get adult use licenses under this bill. They then are subject to 2 separate sets of laws, 2 separate sets of regulators. And lastly, if you have a new agency, they're not getting the benefit of what's been hard-earned knowledge, experience, expertise from medical regulators over the last several years, if they're having to start it all from scratch on their own. So the bill as introduced, again, had them separately. We've talked to the sponsor in the House and the Senate about having a merged program within alcohol and tobacco. And we think that will help that if and when this body in the General Assembly is ready to move forward, will give Maryland the chance to be most successful with a legalized adult use program. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. All right, we're going next to Karen O'Keefe.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Karen O'Keefe. I'm an attorney and the Director of State Policies at the Marijuana Policy Project. I've worked in dozens of states, including Illinois, Vermont, and Virginia, on their legalization bills, MPP is one of more than 24 organizations that comprise the Maryland Cannabis Policy Coalition. We urge the committee to amend SB 708 to mirror the February 16th substitute of HB 32 and to work with Senator Feldman, Delegate Lewis, and our coalition on a few outstanding amendments, and then to swiftly pass it. On the issue of microgrows, Maryland can create more opportunity for Black-owned and other small businesses and improve access for supply for new social equity retailers, while also addressing concerns about oversupply by having discrete licensing periods for growers that would not be capped, but instead could be reopened and closed based on demand. Voters recognize that, like alcohol prohibition before it, cannabis prohibition has been a harmful failure. Prohibition wastes millions of dollars, tears families apart, and has been unequally enforced. It makes control impossible. Only legalization and regulation allows protections for communities, the environment, cannabis consumers, and workers. Penalizing adults for using cannabis is also offensive to one of our core values, liberty. While it is not harmless, cannabis is far safer than alcohol, tobacco, and many medications. The sky has not fallen in states that legalize. There is no effort to repeal the laws, and their popular sport has increased substantially. Graduation rates are up, teen use is down, and workers' comp costs are down in Colorado. Legal cannabis has improved the well-being of large numbers of people. Research shows that most adult use consumers are using cannabis as an over-the-counter medication and are reducing their use of prescription medications and over-the-counter medications as a result. Virginia passed its bill in 46 days. Maryland can and must harmonize the two bills, finalize the details before crossover, and get them to Governor Hogan's desk. In 2018 alone, nearly 17,000 Marylanders were arrested for cannabis possession, 8,781 of whom were Black Marylanders. How many more people will have their lives turned upside down if Maryland's legislature delays for another year? We understand the session is unique and appreciate that you are risking your lives to do the work your constituents elected you to do. We ask that you make the time for this critical bill, as it is past time for Maryland to end the devastating racist war on marijuana and to begin repairing the harms it has inflicted. We would be most happy to meet with members of the committee about any concerns, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move to Neil Franklin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I've testified once before your committee, so I'll give a brief overview again of my background and the Law Enforcement Action Partnership. We do support SB 708. Again, quick, 3 decades in Maryland policing for me with the Maryland State Police, Baltimore City, and Maryland Transit. Most of my career was either in drug investigations or criminal investigation. And then my final years were in training. The Law Enforcement Action Partnership is a national organization of police, prosecutors, judges, and others who are working on, in addition to drug policy reform, we're also working on police reform and other areas of criminal justice reform. We have been working on this issue of moving cannabis into a legal regulated industry for years, and we have worked in just about every state in this country on that. I'll speak briefly to some things that are not in my written testimony, so please read my written testimony. I want to say first that Senator Feldman gave a great national overview along with some of the others who have testified, so I'm not going to repeat the numbers in the interest of time, but it is Maryland's turn for a regulated adult market. I personally worked with members of the Pennsylvania legislature, Delaware, and Virginia, which you heard is moving forward. The governor will sign that. And we're right smack in the middle of that, and DC is to our south. Understand that many of the unconstitutional policing stops and searches that came to light in the Baltimore DOJ investigation were about cannabis and its distinct odor, which is used as probable cause for searching people in their cars and their homes. This is still occurring. It's not just Baltimore, it is from one end of the state to the next. It's just that Baltimore ended up in the DOJ investigation. I want to speak about the pieces of this legislation that you wouldn't ordinarily associate with improving community and public safety. And that is the equity pieces that you're hearing about with this piece of legislation, dealing with race and those who have been convicted, formerly incarcerated folks for these specified cannabis-related crimes. We got to understand that we have to create opportunities for people who have become casualties in this war on drugs and this war on cannabis, the disenfranchised, and not just employment opportunities. They have to have opportunities to be license holders and business owners and investors in this industry going forward. It's very important because if we don't provide those opportunities, they will not only remain in the illicit market, but help to push it forward, making it more difficult. But as more and more states come online, we have to understand and realize that history dictates. Let's look at alcohol prohibition. As more and more states in 1933 came online to re-regulate alcohol, literally crushed the illicit market.
I wish
So-
we had more time. But
Okay, so I'll end right here, Madam Chair.
okay, and we'll
Okay.
wait for people's questions. Will
Okay.
Jones. Jones present?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
You have 2.5 minutes.
Okay. All right. And thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of this bill. I'm the Communications and Outreach Associate for the organization Smart Approaches to Marijuana, and we are opposed to this bill. There are many statements that have been made over the course of this hearing on this bill that we would object to, and I do not have time to outline them all. My remarks are also have been submitted by email. They're written down, and so the comments that I will share in the remaining minute that I have, you can find them all there with sources as well. But many things have been misrepresented. For example, with polling, we do find high numbers of people that support legalization in the polls that are put forward, but that is because people are offered this false dichotomy where they're only allowed, the options presented are legalization or criminalization. And I would think that most of us here agree that criminalization is an incorrect policy for marijuana policy. However, there is a much better route forward, which is decriminalization, which does not entail many of the negative consequences that are associated with legalization that states that have gone down that road have seen. And I want to highlight a few of those with the remaining time that I have. Youth use has risen. I'm not talking about 10 or 12 or 13-year-olds, and that's where you may have seen it stay stable. But when we're talking about 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20, which is still under the legal age, we see increases, substantial increases in that. We see increases in drug driving fatalities, and that's of huge concern in states that have legalized, substantial increases there. But perhaps most important to me, and why I first got involved in this issue, is that we see the continued disproportionate targeting of disadvantaged communities by the commercialization of the marijuana industry. We hear that we should regulate marijuana like alcohol, and unfortunately that's what's being done. But in neighborhoods like mine, the first store that I get to in any direction when I walk out the front door of my house is a liquor store. This is still in 2021. In those stores, the convenience stores in communities like mine are so plastered with advertisements for alcohol, tobacco, and the lottery that you cannot even see inside the windows of these stores. And that is what we're seeing in states that have commercialized marijuana. Colorado has more pot shops than Starbucks and McDonald's combined. They're disproportionately located in disadvantaged communities, 1 for every 47 residents in places like Denver, Colorado, and minority communities. And it is our communities that will bear the disproportionate negative health impacts of something that is addictive. Cannabis use disorder is on the rise. Cannabis hyperemesis syndrome is something that is also on the rise. And there are other negative mental health impacts associated with that. Everyone does not incur these, but those that do will be most hurt in disadvantaged communities. And this has been completely ignored. We should not be surprised when Altria, which is the mother company of Marlboro cigarettes, has invested millions of dollars and is lobbying in Virginia and federally for legalization. And so what we're seeing I'm going to quickly list some major alcohol and big tobacco companies that invested in this. We have Corona, Blue Moon, Heineken, and many other major tobacco and alcohol companies that have invested in this, and many of your colleagues have also received donations from the cannabis industry today. And this is on record.
Have to butt in. We're going to go through the rest of the list, and when we open up for questions, people will probably have questions for a number of you, considering some of the issues you have brought up. So we're going next to Amelia Aria.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Amelia Aria, and I'm a professor at the University of Maryland School of Public Health. My research as a public health scientist during the past 20 years includes leading one of the largest federally funded studies on the impacts of young adult substance use, including cannabis. Today, I want to focus your attention on the negative impact of cannabis use on brain function and educational achievement. Unfortunately, these issues are largely left out of the legalization conversation. And I would really suggest that you go to your constituents and let parents know that these are some of the risks to their young adult college students' lives. My testimony is based on 10 of our own published studies and studies conducted elsewhere, 58 of which I have attached. And the evidence is clear, strong, and compelling, rather than what was represented before about how it's conflictual. There's really strong evidence for most of these things. So science tells us that young adults ages 18 to 29 are the most likely to use cannabis, and it places them at substantially higher risk for mental health problems, drug dependence, blunted academic achievement. All of these outcomes are at odds with Maryland's mission to educate and prepare our youth to succeed. Making cannabis more available has increased use. It can erode cognitive abilities, increase risk of disengaging from school and other responsibilities. These negative impacts extend across genders, racial and ethnic groups, and individuals of all socioeconomic statuses, and can result in a cascade of social and economic loss across our broader society. This will only get worse as cannabis potency rises and new cannabis products become available with commercialization. In my written testimony, I talk about dabbing and very, very high potency cannabis products that are very, very risky for a lot of these outcomes. So you have a critical choice to make. I urge you to listen to science. I think we've heard that in the last year. But we might debate a lot of things today, but we'd all agree that young adults have a chance to deserve a chance to thrive. No one would say, let's make it harder for our young people to achieve our potential. Let's make Maryland a leader, not a lemming, a leader in education, as we always have been, a leader in workplace productivity, a leader in innovation. Let's not put up barriers that can compromise the success of our young people. Please, thank you for your time, and I can answer.
Thank you. We're going to Vicky Oram.
Thank you, Madam Chair and the committee for an opportunity to speak with you today. I oppose this bill, and I have also submitted written testimony with regards to my opposition. I just have a few comments regarding what I've heard today. First,
Now you just muted yourself.
oh, can you hear me now?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. All right. It is very disturbing to me that social equity reforms are attached to a drug bill. It is also disturbing that what I've heard from most of the legislators is concern regarding the protection of the industry for the 22 growers already in the industry. You've heard that there is a lack of product and we need more product. I've heard Vice Chairman Feldman state that you can't open the market up to 100 million people, but 100 million people won't have the expertise nor the financial ability to participate in this market. I have been a resident of Maryland for over 50 years. I am a two-time applicant and have spent close to $1 million of my own money in an attempt to enter this market. You will continue to have a black and white market as long as you continue to protect the industry for a few. Allow people to enter. If they enter and are successful, great. If they enter and they fail, then that's what happens in an open market. Again, I just ask that you consider not connecting. This is an 86-page bill. You've connected criminal reform issues with this bill. And the only thing that this bill should be concerned with is whether you're going to legalize marijuana and who should get a license. And it's my belief that it should be open. And if you succeed, you succeed. And if you fail, you fail. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll be
Thank
happy to
you.
answer any questions, but you do have my written testimony.
Okay, and we're going finally to Regina Ally.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and honorable committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Regina Ali, and I'm the Public and Government Affairs Manager for AAA Mid-Atlantic here in the state of Maryland. While we at AAA recognize the many social complexities of Senate Bill 708, as well as the many public policy impacts of the legislation, AAA opposes the legalization of recreational cannabis due to the inherent traffic safety risk. According to research conducted by the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety, the proportion of fatal crashes involving drivers who recently used cannabis doubled in Washington state after the state legalized the drug. Colorado, Nevada, and Oregon all saw an increase in crash rates as well as insurance claims following legalization. In fact, Colorado saw a 153% increase in fatalities with drivers who were positive for cannabinoid only or cannabinoid in combination with other drugs and or alcohol after legalization. Another big concern for AAA is the challenge police officers face in determining impairment at the roadside. Currently, no chemical testing procedures exist to reliably predict driver impairment due to consumption of cannabis. Unlike with alcohol, there is no scientific correlation between the concentration of active THC in the blood and the person's level of impairment or propensity to cause a crash. As a result, law enforcement must undergo costly, time-consuming additional training for a subset of officers to be trained and classified as drug recognition experts or DREs. Cannabis can affect people differently, making it challenging to develop consistent and fair guidelines for motorists so that one would know how long to wait to drive after consuming the drug in a way that would not impact their ability to drive safely. While AAA remains opposed to the legalization, we have provided several recommendations to be considered for inclusion in any legislation to legalize recreation cannabis in the interest of traffic safety and fairness to motorists, which we have in our written testimony before you. As an advocate for the safety of motorists and all roadway users, AAA believes it's dangerous to legalize cannabis before we are prepared to manage the potential roadway safety consequences and provide law enforcement officers with all the training and resources they need to address this critical traffic safety issue. We thank Vice Chairman Feldman and this committee for your consideration and hearing our concerns. Due to the traffic safety implications, AAA respectfully urges an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And we have 4 committee members who have indicated they have questions. I'm just going to list the order and you can take them in that order and try to make the questions specific and brief. If you know who you want to direct it to, that's fine. Otherwise, Hershey, Klossmeyer, Kramer, and Reedy. All right, start with Senator Hershey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We just heard many of the concerns about legalizing marijuana. Fortunately, there's a protest going on outside my window here. But we just heard many of the concern about legalizing marijuana, but it seems that we may be willing to forego those risks and impacts, mainly because our government has a spending problem. And it's no secret that this bill is about generating revenue. Assuming we do move forward, the quickest way to generate this revenue is getting product to the market. Mr. Bryce, you had mentioned combining or merging programs. And then you mentioned something about possibly allowing medical cannabis growers to also grow adult use marijuana. Is there a process for that? And does this bill have any limits on the size or of current growers in what they're doing?
Thank you, Senator. So I think there's a few things there. One, the bill, as I mentioned, does allow existing licensees, growers, dispensers, and processors to enter the market before other licenses are issued in exchange for a significant fee that would jumpstart the social equity fund, which would then provide funds to social equity applicants who were apply for the next round of licenses. There, as far as merging the industries, yes, we would be required to continue to maintain a supply of product for patients. I think it's vaguely worded in the bill and probably needs to be better defined, but we would need to maintain that supply. So there would be limits on supply early on while we're supporting both markets. One of the concerns is there are caps on the size of licensees in the adult use market. How that relates to existing licensees who've already have facilities of a certain size are going to continue to need to meet the medical only market for at least 18 months to close to 2 years under this bill. How do they fit into that? And if they're allowed to be a certain size, why aren't we allowing the other licensees to also be that size? There are also a lot of things that need to be looked at. Ms. Wiseman mentioned limits on ownership. There are certain restrictions in the medical program on the number of ownerships. There's different restrictions in the adult use bill. How do those relate to each other? There are employment restrictions in the medical market as far as people with former criminal records that are different than those in this bill. There's restrictions on the transfer of medical licenses for 3 years. There's currently delivery and transport operations that medical dispensaries, growers, and processors have that they would not be licensed under the adult use market. So there are all these things that go into doing it. It's resolvable, but I think you can't focus on one piece of it. You have to figure out how to fit it all together, while definitely maintaining room for others to enter the market.
Mr. Tilburg, real quick.
Senator Klostermeyer.
Madam Chair, if I just finished and relate that back to Mr. Tilburg as the regulator of this, do you see the same types of, although Mr. Bryce said that they are resolvable, but do you see these same types of challenges in overseeing a merged program with what appears to be either a very large amount or an unlimited number of licensees?
Sure. Thank you for the question. There are 34 different medical programs, 15 different adult use. There's no two states do it the same way. So when we talk about the difference between micro grows in the House and Senate bills of unlimited versus having a cap, there's really no jurisdiction other than Oklahoma that truly is unlimited, that if you want a license, you can go get it. There's a lot of different approaches. Typically the discretion is with the regulator to open up an application period. Anyone who meets the criteria can get it, and then they reevaluate based on supply and demand. As Ms. O'Keefe mentioned, was a potential amendment. So some of the other things that folks have been talking about here today with public health issues, youth use, these are factors in policy decisions of how many businesses you want to operate. And there are trade-offs. If you have 9,000 licensees like Oklahoma has, they make it to less than 10% of those businesses in a year to inspect them. That raises certain health and safety concerns. On the other hand, there are certain principles of economic liberty that are addressed through that in having anyone be able to participate. So it's up to you all with how you structure this to weigh those different issues and what's most important or how you balance them.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Klostermeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question is for, I don't know if she's still there. Karen? Oh, there you are. Okay. All along, whenever this discussion has come over the past umpteen years, well, since Colorado was like the forerunner. And so I always wanted to know, was it worth it with the tax revenues. And can you go over, I don't know if you know or if Dan might know, but you can start.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So we actually went ahead and did projections using the amount of sales in Colorado, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, all the way to 6. And we adjusted it for Maryland's population, and then we adjusted it again for the slightly lower pre-legalization use rate, and ran them for HB 32 as amended, and then again for SB 708's tax rates, which are lower. And what we found was that over the first 6 years of legal sales, we could anticipate that HB 32's reprint would generate around 1.2 billion with a B in state tax revenue, whereas SB 708 would generate around 705 million over 6 years, or about 500 million less. And I've heard it mentioned in some of the testimony, a claim that if you have a higher tax rate, you'll have less revenue. And that actually has not been what we've seen. The two oldest states, Washington and Colorado, Washington has one of the highest tax rates. It's 43.5% at the state level plus local taxes. And they've brought in the most revenue per capita. They brought in $616 million just last year, whereas Colorado brought in $362 million last year. So it was about $20 per resident more in Washington than Colorado. So that hasn't borne out, and the tax rates in both bills, even at the highest, because they all have tiered approaches, would actually be lower than Virginia's tax rate of 30%. So Delegate Lewis's bill would have a lot more funding for the community reinvestment, HBCUs, and everything else, and they both would be lower than the neighboring state.
And is Washington and Colorado, I believe Colorado at the very beginning, was it for education, or is it just a whole lot of different things?
It actually is more for, it started out for capital construction for education. They had a certain percent that went to, and now even more of it goes to that. But there's also about, I think, 10 or 15 different things. And it's possible that Dan might have more details on that. But I know there's been homeless initiatives in some areas. In Washington state, a lot of the money goes to letting more people enroll in their Medicaid. I hope I'm getting it right, not Medicare, but one of the health insurance programs. And they also have about 15 other line items. This bill would have 25%. Both bills have the same percent breakdown. It's just a question of how much total taxes and revenue. And a lot of it, 63%, would be one of the buckets that's related to racial justice, reinvestment. There's community reinvestment, HBCUs, training for cannabis industry professionals, and so forth.
Well, I'd like to be financial education, but we'll leave it at that.
Okay, Senator Kramer.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Aria, let me ask you a question. It appears that the train is getting ready to pull out of the station, with public health kind of being very, very low on the totem pole, way in the last car on the train here. With that thought in mind, is it possible for you and others that very thoughtfully are concerned about the public health side of this could look at the bill and start advising this committee as to how we may minimize the public health issues, because there's huge money involved here. And I think that's the fuel for the steam engine. I think Mr. Jones's point about how, this is not going to be that different from liquor, in that you step out the front door in certain communities and there's going to be a liquor store on every corner. And I think also we heard a lot about, well, it's already happening, so you might as well legalize it. But I believe you brought out the point that it actually has increased where it has been legalized, the use. So my question would simply be, would you please start focusing on the public health side and how we may address that in the legislation? And then I would ask Ms. Ali, and you had indicated, I believe, that you may have already made suggestions from AAA. The accidents that you noted the increases, and that was at the very beginning of this hearing, that was a concern that I raised. have those been consistent? You indicated that there was this dramatic increase in traffic accidents in the states that have, already got their programs up and running. Has that continued? Was there at any point a decline, or is that ongoing?
Senator Kramer, I can find that out for you. I know we've done various studies and some of them are contained, the resources and links. I know we looked at some with Washington State from 2010 to 2014. I don't have it at my fingertips, but I can certainly get an answer for you on that question.
All right, and again, the same request of you, certainly, please. Any suggestion, thoughts as to how we best this legislation to address public safety and public health would be most appreciated. Thank you.
Absolutely. And sir, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut off Amelia, but we do in our written testimony, Senator Kramer, have several recommendations that we feel are critical to be included in any type of legalization should we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Senator Kramer, I really appreciate your
I need to follow Senator Reedy.
We'll talk.
Yeah, I have just listening to this hearing, and with this issue's been in front of the previous committee I was on as well, but it's been very interesting to hear the perspectives of both sides. And I'm sympathetic. I've always been a little sympathetic to the libertarian argument about legalization, but I have a concern, and Karen O'Keefe, I wonder if maybe I could ask you this question. I was looking up some statistics about Colorado. I know we've talked about the rise in traffic accidents and use on the roads. And I've seen that people try to dispute that as well, but it seems pretty clear that it's happened. But something else I found, that New York Times did a big study of sort of marijuana legalization at age 5 in Colorado last year. And they say that, and I assume they're correct in reporting this, that that Colorado, about twice as many residents in Colorado smoke marijuana as the rest of America. And I'm saying that's like a New York Times report. I don't have anything beyond that. I guess my question, it stands to reason to me. One of the things I've always struggled with and wrestled with on marijuana use, on legalizing it for recreational use, I've always supported it for medical, is when we tell people that it's legal to do it, we tell people it's okay to do it to some extent. And I don't really always believe government should be telling people what they should and shouldn't do. But we're talking about taking something that is currently illegal and making it legal. And I wonder if you could comment about, it's not a good thing for more people to smoke marijuana, in my opinion. I mean, could you comment on that?
Yes, I have many things I can say about it. The first couple are, this could be a factor of many different things. For one thing, people tend to lie about something more when it's a crime. So there is definitely some underreporting pre-legalization. Second, Colorado was tied for the first and the most known. So there were actually people that moved to Colorado who were already using cannabis that wanted to buy it and possess it legally. So there's probably a much higher bump because of people not lying anymore and people moving there. But there are, interestingly, the age group that has the most increase is 65 and older. And for some people, I do think it's a good thing. I live in California and we have a really broad, I used to live in Maryland, I moved here from there. And we have a really broad medical law. And my own husband had used like ridiculous amounts of ibuprofen and other painkillers. And I was always worried about his organs. But getting into the medical program is a huge hassle. You know, you have to get a doctor's note, it takes money, it takes time. You don't want to be on a government or in a list. And so since it's been legal, he's used cannabis instead, and he's been able to stop using all those medications. He actually had to have kidney surgery. He didn't even use the opiates. He was prescribed post-kidney surgery. So for people like my husband, honestly, it's just a huge relief that he has an alternative to these medications that I thought were possibly destroying his organs and that could have gotten him hooked on opiates. So there are a lot of people. There was a survey in Denver of people using adult use cannabis. 65% said they used it for pain, and 70% something said they used it for sleep. Those could be reversed, but both were over 60.
That's actually real helpful information. And I understand that perspective, I think, and that is, you know, I definitely get it. And I'm learning more and more a lot about trying to stay away from medications as much as possible too. But I guess the concern that and this is just for, you know, this is just a final statement because I know we're going to move on. I mean, I'm just concerned about more people doing things to disconnect from society. And I don't know how to square that in my mind right now. I mean, that's my concern, but I do appreciate your answers. And Madam Chair, thank you very much.
Okay. I think this ends the testimony for today.
I think
Madam
Senator
Chair.
Hayes, Madam Chair.
Yeah,
Senator
I had
Hayes
a question for
Oh,
Karen.
Senator Haynes, I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll make it brief. Karen, I think the Vice Chair directed that maybe you might be able to best answer the question about the caps placed on the micro growers. And then one of my constituents who's watching at home asked me about opportunities to transition into the industry. Those individuals who are unlicensed, unregulated pharmaceutical reps, also referred to as corner boys. What opportunities have you seen around the country to transition them kind of like in this industry that are working?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So on the transitioning people who are already on the illicit market, the bill has what's called the social equity status, as which was mentioned, that has exclusive access to delivery and transport licenses forever, a head start for other licenses, and they get capital, technical assistance, and training. One of the types of categories of people that meet that definition are people with past convictions or that live in areas that are both lower income and disproportionately policed. So this is particularly designed for that. And there is also robust funding for cannabis training. So in addition to ownership opportunities, people can get into the workplace as well. And that also has, specific amounts of money specifically for re-entering citizens and specifically for people for disproportionately impacted communities. So there's that piece. On the issue of the micro grows, Delegate Lewis's bill initially just had uncapped grows and let regulators set the tiers. His amended bill to kind of find a middle ground would just have uncapped for up to 5,000 square feet. And as Mr. Tilburg was mentioning, essentially a way we can avoid the possibility of oversupply while also having people not be in the position that Ms. Oram was in, where you put all this money in and you end up with nothing, is to just have an application period. Everybody who qualifies is issued a license. Then a while later, they see, is there oversupply? Do we need more? And then they do it again. So essentially, that was the kind of middle ground to manage concerns about oversupply while also ensuring people can actually have opportunity and get a license. And this also would allow somebody to both have a processor license and a retail license as a social equity applicant, and also grow their own so they don't have to be dependent on larger, vertically integrated existing operators.
Thank you. Committee, remember we have a voting session this evening, and the analysts send word they are almost ready. So in 10 minutes, if you could be in the committee room, we will